Welcome to a journey through the world of spira. Let yourself settle in comfortably, there's no rush, know where you need to be. Just breathe slowly, and let these stories wash over you like gentle waves on a distant shore. Tonight, we begin our exploration in a world both beautiful and melancholy. A world where the sky meets the sea in endless blue horizons, where ancient mysteries sleep beneath crystal waters, and where hope persists, even in the face of recurring sorrow. Our first discovery concerns the very nature of spira itself. Imagine, if you will, a world caught in an endless cycle. Not the gentle cycle of seasons, or the peaceful rhythm of day turning to night, but something far more profound. Spira is a world trapped, held in the grip of an ongoing cycle of destruction, caused by an entity known only as sin. Picture this world, where entire cultures, entire ways of life, have grown not around progress, not around building toward some distant future, but around coping, around surviving, around adapting to periodic cataclysms that arrive as inevitably as the tide. Where other worlds might have marched steadily toward industrialization, toward greater and greater technological achievement, spira learned a different lesson. The people of this world, generation after generation, chose not to rebuild what was lost, but to live differently, to live simply, to live in the shadow of destruction, and somehow, impossibly, to find peace there. Let that image rest in your mind, a world where yesterday's ambitions were set aside, for today's survival and tomorrow's hope. And now, let us drift toward our second understanding. Scattered across spira's landscape, like forgotten dreams, lie ruins. Ancient structures that speak of a different time, a different spira entirely. Especially in the vast, open spaces of the calm lands, and beneath the gentle, rocking waves of the ocean, you can find them. These are not simple ruins. Not the remains of primitive dwellings or crude settlements. No. These are remnants of something magnificent. Something that once reached toward the heavens with metal and machinery, with innovation and ambition. A civilization that was highly advanced, that ran on machina, on technology that most of spira's current inhabitants would find bewildering. Complex gears and circuits, power sources long dormant, structures built with mathematical precision that has endured for 1,000 years. Walk through these ruins in your mind, slowly, reverently. See the way vines have claimed the metal frameworks, how water flows through chambers that once hummed with energy. These silent witnesses to history stand as monuments to what was, and what was lost, when sin first came to spira. Our third piece of knowledge speaks of devastation on an unimaginable scale. The calm lands. Even the name carries a certain irony, a quiet sadness. Today, they stretch out endlessly, a vast, open plain where the wind whispers through tall grasses, where the horizon seems impossibly distant, where travelers can walk for days under an endless sky. But the calm lands were not always calm. They were not born from gentle geological processes, from the patient work of wind and water over millennia. No. The calm lands were created in a single, terrible moment of destruction. Picture two great powers, Babel and Zanarkand, cities of such might and influence that their names alone carried weight. During the Old Machina War, these two civilizations clashed. And when they did, when their full arsenals were brought to bear, when machina weapons of devastating power were unleashed, the land itself was transformed, reshaped, devastated on such a scale that mountains were leveled, forests were obliterated, entire regions were simply erased. And what remained was the calm lands. A memorial written in geography, to the terrible cost of that ancient war. The battle was titanic. Continent spanning. The kind of conflict that reshapes not just borders, not just political systems, but the physical world itself. Stand in the calm lands today, and you are standing in a scar. A wound in the earth that will never fully heal. Breathe slowly, and imagine standing in the center of those plains, knowing that beneath your feet lies a history of unimaginable conflict. Let us turn now to something more intimate, more personal. In spira, every single day unfolds with ritual. Not the ritual of habit, of morning coffee or evening meals, but ritual in its truest sense. Sacred acts, performed with intention, to ward off the ever-present threat of sin. Imagine waking each morning, and before anything else, before breakfast, before work, offering prayers to Yevon. The teachings guide every action, every decision. Prayer isn't something saved for temples or special occasions, It is woven into the very fabric of daily existence. Children learn the prayers before they learn to read. Fishermen offer them before casting nets. Merchants pray before opening their stalls. The words become as natural as breathing, a constant background hum of devotion, of hope, of desperate bargaining with fate. And then, there are the sending ceremonies. When someone dies, especially in sin's wake, summoners perform these sacred rites. They dance, graceful movements filled with purpose and sorrow, sending the souls of the departed to the far plane. Without these ceremonies, the dead might linger, lost and confused, or worse, transform into fiends. And so the sending becomes essential. Not just a comfort to the grieving, but a necessity. A way to protect the living, by helping the dead move on. Life in Spira isn't simply lived, it is performed. Each day is a careful balance, of faith, of ritual, of doing what must be done, to maintain whatever fragile piece is possible, in a world forever shadowed by sin. Let your breathing match this rhythm, slow, intentional, peaceful. And finally, our fifth discovery speaks to an unexpected detail. Here is something curious, something that reveals just how profoundly sin has shaped Spira's world. Many people, perhaps even most people in Spira, cannot swim. Think about that for a moment. Spira is a world of islands, of coastal settlements, of endless blue waters stretching between communities. The ocean is everywhere. It surrounds, it defines, it connects. And yet, swimming is not a common skill. Perhaps this is because sin lives in those waters. Perhaps parents, watching their children play too near the shore, feel a terror that runs deeper than the usual parental concern. Perhaps the ocean, beautiful as it is, represents not freedom, not adventure, but danger. Mortal danger. A place where the most terrible force in the world makes its home. Why learn to swim, when the water belongs to sin? Why teach your children a skill, that might only give them false confidence, that might encourage them to venture where they should never go? And yet, and this is the remarkable part, ocean travel persists. Ships still sail between islands. Trade continues. People still cross those dangerous waters, out of necessity, out of courage, or perhaps simply because life must go on. The ships are not safe. Sin frequently attacks anything on the open sea. Vessels are destroyed. Entire crews are lost. Everyone knows someone who never returned from a voyage. The ocean is a graveyard, a place of constant threat. But the ships sail anyway. The people travel anyway. Because islands need trade. Because families are separated by water. Because sometimes, you simply must reach the other shore, no matter the risk. Because in Spira, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to continue, despite fear, despite danger, despite knowing that sin could rise from the depths at any moment. The ocean remains, both lifeline and threat, beautiful and terrible, necessary and deadly, just like everything else in this complex, contradictory, resilient world. And so, we conclude our first journey, through 5 pieces of Spira's story. 5 small windows, into a vast and complex world. A world of beauty and sorrow, of ancient ruins and daily rituals, of courage in the face of impossible odds. We have seen a world shaped by catastrophe, built on the ruins of a greater civilization, scarred by ancient war, sustained by daily faith, and surrounded by dangerous waters that must still be crossed. Let these images settle softly, like dust motes drifting in afternoon light. There's no need to hold on to them tightly, no need to remember every detail. Just let them rest somewhere in the back of your mind. Breathe deeply, slowly, and know that Spira's story continues, waiting patiently, for whenever you're ready to explore further. For now, simply rest. Take a deep breath, let your body sink a little deeper into comfort, and prepare to explore something both terrible and fascinating. Tonight, we turn our attention to sin itself. Not as a force of mindless destruction, but as something more complex. Something with origins, with purpose, with a tragic story woven into its very existence. Let the world around you fade, and drift with me, into understanding. Our first truth tonight speaks of creation. Sin is not, as many believe, some natural disaster. Not a storm that simply arose from chaos. Not a punishment spontaneously generated by the world itself. No. Sin is something far more deliberate. Far more purposeful. Sin is a biomagical colossus. A being of flesh and spirit, of fireflies and will, created deliberately as a living weapon. Imagine the audacity of such an act, the desperation that would drive someone to forge something so devastating. And who created this weapon? Yevon himself. The same ancient summoner whose name would become the foundation of Spira's religion. The same being who trapped the world in its spiral of death. But here, at the very beginning, there was a reason. A purpose. Yevon created Sin to protect something precious. To protect Zanarkand, not the dream version that would come later, but the real Zanarkand. The city of summoners. His home. Bevel was coming, with their machina armies, their weapons of terrible power. An invasion was imminent. And so Yevon, in an act that would echo through 1,000 years, created the ultimate guardian. A creature so powerful, so devastating, that nothing could stand against it. Sin was born, not from hatred, but from love. From the desperate need to protect something beloved, no matter the cost. Our second understanding reveals Sin's influence on the world itself. Sin does not merely destroy. Its presence alone, simply by existing, warps the very fabric of Spira. Like a stone creating ripples in still water, Sin's existence sends waves of distortion through reality itself. Fireflies, those glowing motes of spiritual energy that drift through Spira's air, respond to Sin. They gather. They swirl. They become agitated and confused. And where Sin has passed, where death has occurred, where the unsent dead linger in large concentrations, fiends are born. Picture it, the dead who have not been properly sent to the far plane, their spirits lingering, confused and full of sorrow or rage. In normal circumstances, they might simply drift, gradually fading. But in Sin's presence, with fireflies warped and twisted, these spirits take physical form. They become monsters. Creatures of aggression and pain, attacking the living, unable to rest, unable to move on. Sin doesn't just bring destruction directly. It leaves behind a wake of ongoing danger, transforming tragedy into sustained threat. Every place Sin attacks becomes a breeding ground for fiends, for years, sometimes generations afterward. The damage spreads, like roots beneath the soil, invisible but inexorable. Let this understanding settle, gently, like snow falling on a winter evening. Breathe slowly, and consider how the most terrible things sometimes begin with the most human motivations. Our third truth explains Sin's terrible attraction. Now we come to something that has shaped all of Spira's society. A behavior of Sin's that seems almost like malevolent intelligence, though perhaps it is simply instinct. Sin is drawn to two things. Like a moth to flame, like iron to a magnet, Sin moves toward large uses of machina, and toward big gatherings of people. Think about what this means. Any major tournament, any festival, any gathering where hundreds or thousands come together to celebrate, to compete, to simply be human together, becomes a target. A beacon calling Sin toward destruction. The blitzball tournaments. Religious gatherings. Markets and fairs. All the things that make life worth living, all the moments of joy and community, carry within them the seed of catastrophe. And machina, the tools that could rebuild civilization, that could ease suffering and create prosperity, these too call to Sin. Any mechanized project, any attempt to reclaim the technological heights of the past, draws Sin like blood draws a predator. This is why Spira remains frozen. Why progress is impossible. Not just because of Yevon's teachings, but because those teachings reflect a terrible truth. Using machina does attract Sin. Gathering in large numbers does risk annihilation. The prohibition against progress is reinforced every time Sin attacks a city that grew too large, a project that used too many machines. It is a prison with walls built from experience, reinforced by trauma, maintained by fear that is entirely rational. Breathe through this, feeling the weight of it, the terrible logic that traps an entire world. Let us drift now toward our fourth understanding. We have spoken before of the calm. That precious period of peace, when Sin has been defeated, when the world can breathe, when children can be born who might never see the terror with their own eyes. But let us truly contemplate what the calm means. It is temporary. Always, always, temporary. A high summoner completes their pilgrimage, climbs to the summit of challenge, performs the final summoning, and defeats Sin in a moment of impossible bravery and sacrifice. And then, peace. The calm descends like a benediction. Cities can be rebuilt without fear. Ships can sail freely. Blitzball tournaments can be held. Young people can fall in love and plan futures, without the shadow of immediate death hanging over every decision. But here is the cruel arithmetic of it. The calm lasts, usually, about a decade. 10 years. Perhaps slightly more. Perhaps, in rare cases, a bit less. 10 years. One generation of childhood. One span of time for a young couple to meet, to marry, to have children, to see those children grow just old enough to remember, before sin returns. And when sin comes back, it is in a new form. A new incarnation. But it is still sin. Still the same cycle. Still the same spiral of death. Imagine building a life, knowing that your peaceful years are numbered. That your children will likely face what you faced. That all the rebuilding, all the hope, all the careful construction of normal life, has an expiration date. Let that sadness wash over you gently, like rain on a quiet day. And now, our fifth truth, the most personal one. There is a name we must speak. A man who was complicated, flawed, distant, brilliant at what he did, terrible at what he should have been. Jacked. He was many things. A champion blitzball player. A father, though not a particularly good one. A man from Zanarkand, the dream Zanarkand, though he never understood that truth while he lived there. A man who disappeared one day, while out on a training voyage, pulled through strange waters into a spira he didn't understand. And he became something else. Something terrible and tragic. Jacked became the final Eon. He offered himself, gave himself, so that Braska, the High Summoner, could defeat sin and bring the calm. It was an act of redemption. Of sacrifice. Of finally, doing something that mattered. But the final summoning is not what Spira believes it to be. It does not simply destroy sin and bring lasting peace. No. The final Eon becomes sin. Jacked became the core of sin. His consciousness, his will, trapped inside that colossal form. Sometimes aware. Sometimes not. Sometimes able to exert tiny amounts of control. Sometimes lost completely to Yevon's instinctive drive to summon, to destroy, to continue the cycle. The incarnation of sin fought throughout most of the game, is Jacked. A father who became a monster. A man who sacrificed himself, only to become the very thing he died to defeat. And his son, Titus, must face this. Must confront not just sin, but his own father, transformed into Spira's greatest nightmare. Breathe deeply, and feel the tragedy of it. The terrible irony. The pain laid upon pain. Let us pause, in this space of understanding. We have traveled deep tonight, into the nature of sin itself. From its creation as a protective weapon, to its warping influence on the world, to its terrible attractions, to the false promise of the calm, and finally, to the personal tragedy of Jacked. These are heavy truths. Dark truths. But there is something important in understanding them. In seeing that even sin, even this force of destruction, has a history, has reasons, has tragedy woven into its very existence. Nothing in Spira is simple. Every element of suffering has roots that go deep, connecting to other suffering, other choices, other moments when someone tried to do the right thing and created catastrophe instead. And so, we conclude this second journey, through sin's story. A story of protection becoming destruction, of fathers becoming monsters, of cycles that seem unbreakable. Let these truths rest lightly, in the back of your mind. You don't need to carry them heavily. Just, acknowledge them, and then, let them settle, like leaves falling to the forest floor. Tomorrow, or whenever you return to this journey, there will be more to discover. More threads to follow. More pieces of this vast and intricate story. But for now, for this moment, simply breathe, deeply, slowly, and rest. Welcome back, once more, to Spira. Let yourself settle in, deeper than before. Tonight's journey takes us into more complex territory, into the corridors of power, into the architecture of belief, and into the shadows where truth is carefully, deliberately, hidden. We speak now, of Yevon. Not the ancient summoner, but the religion built in his name. The church. The institution. The system that has shaped Spira for 1,000 years. Breathe slowly, and let us walk these halls together. Our first truth speaks of foundations. Every religion begins somewhere. With someone. With a story that explains the world, that offers meaning to suffering, that provides structure to chaos. The Yevon religion was founded around worship of Yevon himself. The ancient summoner, elevated to godhood, transformed in memory from a desperate man making terrible choices, into a divine figure worthy of eternal reverence. And at the heart of this religion, lies a belief, a teaching, a fundamental explanation for why the world is as it is. Sin, according to Yevon, is both punishment and test. Punishment for what? For humanity's sins. For their hubris. For their reliance on machina, those machines that once allowed civilization to reach great heights, but which brought only war and devastation. The machina war proved, so the teachings say, that technology leads to suffering. And a test. A trial that humanity must endure. A way to prove their worthiness through faith, through sacrifice, through unwavering devotion to the teachings. It is a theology of guilt. Of blame. If sin comes, it must be because someone used machina. Someone behaved sinfully. Someone failed to pray with sufficient devotion. The cycle continues, because people are not faithful enough, not pure enough, not obedient enough. This is what millions believe. What they teach their children. What gives shape to their understanding of existence. Let that settle, understanding how belief becomes reality, when enough people accept it as truth. Our second understanding reveals the core teaching. At the very heart of Yevon's doctrine lies a promise. A contract between the faithful and their God. A path to safety in a dangerous world. The teachings of Yevon claim, quite explicitly, that abstaining from machina and atoning through prayer and sacrifice will keep people safe from sin. Think about this promise. How comforting it must be. In a world where sin can appear at any moment, where death can come from the depths without warning, here is something you can do. Actions you can take. Prayers you can offer. Sacrifices you can make. Control, in a world that feels fundamentally uncontrollable. If you follow the teachings, if you reject machina, if you pray daily, if you support the summoners in their pilgrimage, then you are doing everything you can. You are protected, as much as anyone can be protected, by divine favor. But here is where truth diverges from teaching. This is not, truly, what sustains the cycle. The cycle continues because of Yevon's summoning, because of the corrupted final eon system, because of mechanisms that have nothing to do with how faithfully ordinary people pray or how completely they reject technology. The promise is false. Not in the sense that it was deliberately designed to deceive, perhaps, in the beginning, those who shaped these teachings believed them. But false nonetheless. People have been praying for 1,000 years. Rejecting machina for 1,000 years. Atoning for 1,000 years. And sin returns, every 10 years, regardless. Breathe through this realization. This gap between what is taught and what is true. Our third truth speaks of hidden history. Now we must look at something more deliberate, more calculated. The Yevon Church does not simply teach, it also conceals. History is a dangerous thing. The truth about the past, about how things really were, about what really happened, this is power. And power can be wielded, or it can be locked away. The Yevon Church deliberately censors history. Not through carelessness. Not through gradual loss of knowledge over centuries. No. Deliberately. With intention. With careful maintenance of ignorance. They hide the truth of the machina war. The real reasons it was fought. The complexity of it. The fact that both sides used machina. That Bevel and Zanarkand both reached for technological power. The teachings presented as a morality tale, simple, clear, but history is never that simple. And Zanarkand. The church hides the truth of Zanarkand's origin. They hide the fact that it was real. That it fell. That dream Zanarkand exists, sustained by the fate, kept alive through Yevon's endless summoning. Why hide these truths? To preserve authority. If people knew that sin was created deliberately by Yevon, if they understood that the final summoning doesn't truly end the cycle, if they realized that dream Zanarkand's existence proves that their entire understanding of history is incomplete, the church's authority would crumble. The sacrificial system of summoners, young people giving their lives for a temporary peace, would be revealed as a perpetuation of tragedy rather than a path to salvation. So the truth is locked away, hidden in sealed chambers, kept from the people, for their own good, so the authorities claim. Let this settle, understanding how truth can be buried, when it threatens those in power. Our fourth understanding reveals hypocrisy at the highest levels. The Yevon Church has teachings about death. About the proper way to handle the passing of the soul. The unsent, those who have died but not been sent to the far plane, are dangerous. They are pitiable. They are against the natural order. Sending ceremonies exist, specifically, to prevent the dead from lingering. To help them move on. To maintain the proper boundary between life and death. And yet, and this is where we find a profound hypocrisy. The Maestas of Yevon, the highest authorities of the church, include several unsent. Dead individuals who continue to function, to hold office, to make decisions, to rule after death. Seymour, Kinnock, others, walking among the living, participating in ceremonies about the sanctity of death, preaching the importance of sending the dead to rest, while being, themselves, the very thing they tell others to fear. Consider the arrogance of this. The casual dismissal of rules that apply to everyone else. The teachings are important, for you, for the common people. But we who lead, we are exceptions. We are necessary. The rules do not bind us. It is hypocrisy, laid bare. The church that defines proper treatment of death, is led by the undead. And this was hidden. Concealed behind ceremony and distance. The common faithful never knew. Never suspected. Believed their leaders were living people, following the same rules, sharing the same mortality. But they were not. Breathe slowly, feeling the weight of this betrayal, this fundamental dishonesty. And now, our fifth truth, speaks of spectacle and suppression. Power maintains itself through many mechanisms. Through teaching. Through tradition. Through the slow accumulation of authority over generations. But sometimes, power requires something more direct. More visible. More brutal. The trial in Bevel. Eunice party, captured, brought before the maestas. Accused. Judged. In a proceeding that had nothing to do with justice, and everything to do with demonstration. This was a show trial. A public execution in the making. Not designed to determine guilt or innocence, but to reinforce the church's power. To remind everyone watching, everyone who would hear the story later, that Yevon's authority is absolute. Dissent will be crushed. Questions will be punished. Those who challenge the teachings, who threaten the system, will be made examples of. This is how institutions protect themselves when truth threatens them. When a summoner who should be revered instead questions the teachings. When guardians who should be faithful instead discover secrets. When the very people who should be the church's greatest symbols become its greatest threat. You display their capture. You parade them before the faithful. You show their punishment. And you send a message, to everyone else, about what happens when you step outside the prescribed path. These tools, show trials, public executions, spectacles of power, these are not unique to Yevon. Throughout history, across many worlds, this is how authority reinforces itself when it feels threatened. And in Spira, where faith is everything, where the church shapes daily life, these spectacles carry particular weight. Let this understanding rest, gently, seeing the mechanisms of control, laid bare. Let us pause here, in this moment of clarity. We have walked through difficult truths tonight. Through the architecture of a religion that began, perhaps, with genuine faith, but became something else. A tool of control. A system of lies. An institution that hides truth, maintains hypocrisy, and crushes dissent. And yet, we must remember, many within Yevon are sincere. Many priests and followers truly believe. They offer genuine comfort. They provide real community. The faith gives meaning to millions of lives. The tragedy is not that Yevon exists, but that its foundations are false. That its highest authorities know the truth, and choose to perpetuate the lie. That good people, faithful people, are caught in a system that uses their devotion, for purposes they don't understand. Nothing is simple. Even systems of control, contain genuine faith. Even lies, are sometimes believed by those who tell them. And so, we conclude this third journey, through the halls of Yevon. Through teachings and concealments. Through hypocrisy and spectacle. Through the complex machinery of institutional power. These truths are heavy, but understanding them, seeing them clearly, is important. Not to breed cynicism, but to understand how systems work. How faith can be weaponized. How authority maintains itself. Let these insights settle, like sediment in still water. You need not carry them as burdens. Simply, acknowledge them, understand them, and then, let them rest. More awaits, in future journeys. More threads to follow. More pieces of this intricate puzzle. But for now, breathe deeply, slowly, and find your rest. Welcome back, to our journey. Settle in, a little deeper now. Let the tensions of the day fade away, as we turn our attention to a city. Not just any city, but one that exists, in multiple forms. Multiple times. Multiple truths layered upon each other like translucent silk. Tonight, we speak of Zanarkand. Breathe slowly, and let us explore, this most mysterious place. Our first truth speaks of what was. Long ago, before sin, before the spiral of death, before the world learned to live small and scared, there was a city called Zanarkand. Not a dream, not a memory, but a real place, built of stone and purpose, filled with living, breathing people. Zanarkand was a powerful city-state, one of the greatest civilizations of its age. But its power came not from machines, not from the mechanical wonders that other nations pursued, but from something older, something more mysterious. Magic and summoners. Picture a city where the art of summoning was not rare, not the province of a chosen few who undertook desperate pilgrimages, but common. A skill cultivated, refined, passed down through generations. Where calling upon the eons was as natural as any other craft. The summoners of Zanarkand were legendary, powerful beyond measure. They could call forth beings of immense power, could reshape reality with their will, could stand against armies through their bond with the eons. This was Zanarkand's strength. This was what made it great. Not steel and circuits, but spirit and magic. Not machina, but the power that flows through all things, through fireflies, through the boundary between life and death. And for a time, this was enough. For a time, Zanarkand stood proud, a beacon of magical achievement, unmatched in its mastery of the summoner's art. Let this image settle, a city of spires and ceremony, of power drawn from ancient pacts, of summoners walking streets paved with purpose. Our second understanding speaks of war and desperation. But there was a rival. There is always a rival. Another great city, Bevel, which had chosen a different path. Where Zanarkand embraced magic, Bevel embraced machina. Where Zanarkand relied on summoners, Bevel built weapons of steel and lightning. And eventually, inevitably, these two philosophies, these two powers, came into conflict. The Machina War. We have spoken of it before, of how it created the calm lands. But now we must understand it from Zanarkand's perspective. From the view of a city watching its rival grow stronger, watching Machina weapons multiply, watching the balance of power shift. Bevel's Machina superiority was undeniable. Their weapons were devastating, efficient, mass-produced. While Zanarkand relied on individual summoners, each one irreplaceable, each one requiring years of training. Bevel could manufacture power. Could build armies of metal that never tired, never doubted, never refused orders. Zanarkand was pushed to the brink. The city of summoners, the beacon of magical power, was losing. Slowly, inexorably, being overwhelmed by mechanical might. And in that desperate moment, with his city facing annihilation, Yevon made a choice. A terrible, profound, impossible choice. He transformed his city's people into fate. Every person, every soul, the entire population of Zanarkand, willingly or not, became the living dead. Became the dreaming statues that would sustain a summons, forever. And with their combined power, their collective dreaming, he preserved Zanarkand. Not as it was, but as an illusion. A memory. A dream that would never end. Breathe through this, feeling the magnitude of it. An entire city, sacrificed, to save an image of itself. Our third truth, reveals the impossible made real. And so, Dream Zanarkand exists. Not in memory, not in history books, but as a living, breathing reality. A continuous summons, maintained by the collective fate of the original Zanarkand's people. Imagine it. A city that should not exist, but does. Buildings that are real, but not real. People who live and love and dream, but who are themselves, part of a larger dream. This is where Titus grows up. In a Zanarkand of bright lights and blitzball. Of tall buildings and crowds and a normal life. A life where sin is just a story. Where the rest of Spira, with its struggles and its sorrows, doesn't exist. Dream Zanarkand exists far from the rest of Spira. Isolated. Protected by its impossibility. A bubble of normalcy, sustained by magic so profound, so intricate, that it has continued for 1,000 years without faltering. The people there don't know they're dreamed. How could they? Everything feels real. The air. The water. The touch of another person's hand. Pain is real. Joy is real. Love is real. And in a sense, the AI real. As real as anything in a world where the boundary between spirit and matter is thin. Where fireflies can take form. Where thoughts can become substance. Dream Zanarkand is a miracle. And a tragedy. And a lie. And a truth. All at once. Let your mind rest with this paradox, not trying to solve it, just acknowledging its strange beauty. Let us drift now to our fourth understanding. But what of the rest of Spira? What do they know of Zanarkand? To the people of Spira, Zanarkand is remembered only as ruins. Ancient, sacred, distant. At the far end of the pilgrimage route, past the calm lands, past Mount Gagazet, at the very edge of the known world, lie the ruins of what was once the holy city. This is where summoners go. The final destination of their pilgrimage. The place where, after months of travel, after gathering the eons, after proving their worth again and again, they will perform the final summoning. Zanarkand the ruin is a place of solemn pilgrimage, of quiet reverence. Guardians and summoners approach it with hearts full of determination and dread, because they know that in those ruins, their journey will reach its conclusion. One way or another. The ruins are beautiful in their decay. Crumbling spires reaching toward the sky. Stone steps worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Chambers where once great summoners lived, now empty, echoing, full of ghosts and memory. No one lives there. No one could. It is too remote. Too damaged. Too sacred. The ruins of Zanarkand exist as a monument, a testament, a final destination. And the people of Spira, when they think of Zanarkand at all, think of this. The ruins. The sacred place. The end of the pilgrimage. They have no idea that elsewhere, the city still lives. Still dreams. Still continues, in impossible defiance of history. Breathe slowly, feeling the gap between what is known and what is true. And now, our fifth truth speaks of the deepest deception. The ruins of Zanarkand are treated as the ultimate sacred site of Yevon, the holiest place in all of Spira. Summoners journey there to fulfill their destiny. Guardians accompany them with reverence. The church speaks of it in tones of utmost respect and devotion. But pilgrims are never told certain things. Critical things. True things. They are never told that the religion's founder, Yevon himself, caused the city's fall. That his actions, his desperate attempt to preserve Zanarkand through transformation, set in motion the events that would lead to sin's creation. They are never told that Yevon now perpetuates sin. That he exists as a parasitic consciousness within that terrible armored form. That every time a summoner performs the final summoning, they become the next incarnation of the very thing they died to defeat. The ruins are sacred, but the truth behind them is hidden. Buried. Locked away in sealed records and forgotten histories. Summoners walk towards Zanarkand believing they go to save the world. And they do, for a time. For 10 years. But they don't know, they can't know, that they are also perpetuating the cycle. That their sacrifice, noble as it is, feeds the very system that ensures sin's return. The tragedy is complete. The deception is total. The holiest site in Spira is also a monument to the lie at the heart of the religion. To the truth that must never be spoken. And for 1,000 years, summoners have walked that path. Have knelt in those ruins. Have given their lives, without ever knowing the full truth of what they were part of. Let this settle, gently, understanding how truth can be hidden in plain sight, how the most sacred things can rest on foundations of deception. Let us pause here, in this space between truths. We have journeyed deep tonight, through the layered realities of Zanarkand. The city that was. The city that dreams. The city that lies in ruins. 3 Zanarkands, 3 truths, all existing simultaneously, all connected by threads of tragedy and sacrifice and impossible magic. This is the complexity of Spira. Nothing is simple. Every truth has layers. Every sacred thing carries shadows. Every ending is also a beginning. Slow, gentle closing. And so, we conclude this fourth journey, through the many faces of Zanarkand. A city that was destroyed and preserved. That ended and continues. That pilgrims revere, without knowing what it truly represents. Let these truths rest lightly, in your mind. Let them settle like leaves on still water. You need not carry them as burdens. Simply, acknowledge them, understand them, and then, let them be. More awaits, in future segments. More threads to follow. More pieces of this intricate tapestry. But for now, for this moment, simply breathe, deeply, slowly, and rest in the quiet, between one truth and the next. Welcome back, once more, to Spira's story. Let yourself sink deeper into comfort, deeper into rest. Tonight we explore something that has woven through all our previous journeys, present in every fact, lurking behind every truth. Tonight, we name it clearly. We look directly at the pattern itself. The cycle. The spiral. The shape of Spira's tragedy. Breathe slowly, and let us begin. Our first truth gives form to the pattern. There is a phrase spoken in spira, whispered in moments of clarity, uttered by those who have stepped back far enough to see the whole picture, rather than just their own small piece of it. The spiral of death. 3 words. Simple, elegant, and terrible in their accuracy. Listen to the rhythm of it. The repeated pattern that has defined spira for 1,000 years. It moves, like a dance, like a wheel, like water circling a drain. Sin attacks. Cities fall. People die. The world mourns. Then, a summoner completes their pilgrimage. Reaches Zanarkand. Performs the final summoning. Defeats sin in a moment of transcendent sacrifice. The calm arrives. Peace settles over the world like a benediction. People rebuild. They marry. Have children. Plant crops. Construct homes. Dare to hope that perhaps this time, the peace will last. 10 years pass. Perhaps a few more. Perhaps a few less. And then, sin returns. Reborn. In a new form. But the same hunger. The same purpose. The same destruction. Attack. Destruction. Calm. Rebirth. Attack. Destruction. Calm. Rebirth. Round and round. A spiral. Descending. Always descending. Never rising. Never breaking free. Just continuing. Endlessly. Hopelessly. And here is the cruelest truth of the spiral. The world cannot move forward. Cannot progress. Cannot escape. Every generation lives the same life as the generation before. Faces the same fears. Suffers the same losses. Celebrates the same temporary victories. Nothing changes. Nothing grows. Nothing evolves. The spiral holds everything in place, turning, but never actually going anywhere. Just spiraling down into death. Again and again and again. Let that pattern settle in your mind, feeling its weight, its inevitability, its terrible, perfect symmetry. Our second understanding reveals the architecture of stagnation. But why? Why can't the world move forward? It's not simply that sin keeps destroying. There's something more insidious at work. Something more systematic. Yevon's system, the religion, the teachings, the entire social structure built around coping with sin. This system keeps spira frozen in place. Technologically stagnant. Socially unchanging. Imagine a world where every tool your grandparents used is the same tool you use. Where every technique, every method, every bit of knowledge remains exactly as it was generations ago. No innovation. No improvement. No advancement. This is spira. Not because people aren't clever. Not because they lack curiosity or ambition. But because any attempt to rebuild using machina, any effort to reclaim the technological heights of the past, is framed as heresy. The teachings are clear. Adamant. Absolute. Machina, machines, technology, these angered sin. These caused the machina war. These brought destruction upon the world. To use them again, is to invite that destruction once more. And so, the prohibition is complete. Not just discouraged, but branded as sin. As betrayal of everything Yevon teaches. As a threat to everyone's safety. If you build a machine, you are not just breaking a rule. You are endangering your neighbors. Your family. Your entire community. Because machina attracts sin. Everyone knows this. Everyone believes it. And they are not entirely wrong, because sin is drawn to machina. But what they don't understand, what they can't know, is that this isn't punishment. This is programming. This is Yevon's original purpose, to destroy machina, to protect Zanarkand from Bavel's mechanical armies, extended across 1,000 years, twisted into something monstrous. The system is perfect. The cage is complete. Progress is heresy. Innovation is sin. Change is death. And so, nothing changes. The spiral continues. Round and round. Generation after generation. Living the same life. Dying the same death. Hoping the same hope. Trapped. Breathe through this understanding, feeling how a system can imprison, even when built from genuine faith, even when sustained by sincere devotion. Our third truth speaks of breaking free. But every cage has a key. Every cycle can be broken. Every spiral, no matter how deep, can be escaped. Though the cost is always higher than anyone imagines. At the end of the story, when all truths have been revealed, when all lies have been exposed, when the spiral of death stands naked in its terrible machinery, a choice becomes possible. A choice that was never available before. Breaking the cycle requires more than defeating sin. That had been done countless times. Countless summoners had given their lives. Countless temporary calms had been achieved. The cycle continued because defeating sin was never enough. Now, to truly break free, to truly end the spiral, something far more fundamental must be destroyed. Yevon himself. Not sin. Not the armored creature. But the ancient summoner within. The consciousness that has become pure instinct. Pure purpose. The parasite that hijacks each final eon, that transforms each summoner's sacrifice into the next incarnation of sin. Yevon must be destroyed. Utterly. Finally. Completely. And with his destruction, two things must end. Two things must be released. Two threads must be cut. First, the summon sustaining dreams and Arkand. That impossible city, kept alive for 1,000 years, maintained by Yevon's endless dreaming, must finally fade. The fate must be allowed to rest. To end their dreaming. To move on to whatever lies beyond. Dreams and Arkand, and everyone in it, must cease to exist. And second, the basis of Yevon's doctrine must crumble. The promise that the final summoning brings lasting peace. The teaching that sacrifice and faith will save the world. The entire system that has kept Spira frozen, must be revealed as the lie it always was. The Church's authority, built on 1,000 years of faith, must fall. These are the costs. These are what must be paid. To break the spiral, Spira must lose its impossible city, and its guiding faith, simultaneously. Everything must change. Or nothing can change. Let this weight settle, gently, understanding that freedom always costs more than we wish to pay. Let us pause, and breathe together. We have walked through the architecture of the spiral tonight. Seen how it turns. How it holds. How it might, just might, be broken. This is the heart of Spira's story. Not just adventure. Not just heroes and villains. But a world trying desperately to escape a pattern that has defined it for so long, that people can barely imagine what life might be like without it. The spiral of death. 3 words that contain 1,000 years of suffering. And hope. Because to name something, is the first step toward changing it. To see the pattern clearly, is to glimpse the possibility that it might be different. Let us reflect, for a moment longer. Think about cycles in your own life. Patterns that repeat. Habits that persist. The ways we sometimes feel trapped, moving in circles, unable to break free even when we see what holds us. Spira's spiral is vast. Cosmic. Built from magic and ancient tragedy. But perhaps, in its own way, it speaks to something universal. The difficulty of change. The weight of tradition. The way systems perpetuate themselves, even when they cause suffering. And the courage it takes, to say, no more. To accept the cost of freedom. To let go of what we know, even when it's painful, even when it means losing something we love, in order to find something better. The spiral can be broken. But only by those willing to pay the price. And so, we conclude this 5th journey, through the spiral itself. Through the pattern that has shaped every story we've told. Every fact we've explored. Every truth we've uncovered. We have named it clearly now. The spiral of death. We have seen its mechanics. Its purpose. Its terrible efficiency. And we have glimpsed, just glimpsed, the possibility of its ending. Let these truths settle, like snow falling on a quiet evening. You need not carry them heavily. Just, acknowledge them, understand them, and then release them. More awaits, in future segments. More threads to follow. More pieces of this story. But for now, simply breathe, deeply, slowly, and rest, in the quiet space, between one cycle and the next. Knowing that all spirals, eventually, must end. Welcome back, to our continuing journey. Let yourself settle, completely now. We have explored the world. The cycle. The history. Now, we turn our attention to the individuals who stand at the center of it all. Tonight, we speak of summoners. Not as abstract heroes. Not as distant legends. But as people. Young people. Who choose, or are chosen, to walk a path that leads, inevitably, to death. Breathe slowly, and let us understand their story. Our first truth speaks of rarity. In all of Spira, with its scattered towns and island settlements, with its millions of people living their daily lives under the shadow of sin, only a very small number become summoners. This is not a common calling. Not something many can do. Not a path open to everyone who wishes it. To become a summoner requires something special. Something rare. The ability to commune with fate. To connect with those ancient souls, encased in stone, dreaming their eternal dreams in the chambers of temples scattered across Spira. Think about what this means. To hear the voices of the dead. To touch minds that have been sleeping for centuries. To form a bond so deep, so profound, that you can call forth their essence, manifest their power as eons, beings of immense strength that will fight at your command. This is not learned from books. Not taught in ordinary schools. Summoners must train at temples. Must spend years, sometimes, learning to quiet their mind enough to hear. To open their heart enough to connect. To strengthen their will enough to sustain the bond. The training is rigorous. Demanding. Many begin, but few complete it. Some lack the spiritual sensitivity. Some cannot bear the weight of communion. Some realize, early on, what the path truly means, and choose to walk away while they still can. Those who continue, who persist, who prove they have the gift and the determination, they become summoners. Rare, precious, set apart from the rest of humanity by their ability to bridge the gap between life and death. Let this settle, understanding how special summoners are, and how few there are to bear this burden. Our second understanding reveals the structure of legitimacy. But having the ability to summon is not enough. Spira is a world where authority matters. Where structure is everything. Where the Church of Yevon controls, not just spiritual matters, but the very shape of society itself. A summoner's official journey must be sanctioned by Yevon. Must receive the Church's blessing. Must follow the prescribed path through the proper temples in the proper order. Without this sanction, without this official recognition, a summoner's pilgrimage is illegitimate. In the eyes of the faith, in the eyes of society, they are not a true summoner. Just someone with power, traveling without purpose, without meaning, without the weight of religious authority behind them. This might seem like mere bureaucracy, simple religious formality, but it is more than that. Much more. The Church's control over who is a legitimate summoner gives them power over the entire cycle. They decide who walks the path. They determine who will reach Samarkand. They control, in effect, when the next calm will come. A summoner who travels without blessing, even if they have the power, even if they could reach Samarkand and perform the final summoning, would not be accepted, would not be celebrated. Their sacrifice would be unofficial, uncounted, perhaps even heretical. And so, summoners seek the Church's blessing, follow the prescribed path, accept Yevon's authority over their journey, because to do otherwise is to sacrifice without recognition, to die without meaning. The Church maintains control, not through force, but through the simple mechanism of legitimacy, through deciding whose death matters and whose does not. Breathe through this, understanding how power operates, through the granting or withholding of recognition. Our third truth speaks of protection and companionship. No summoner walks alone. This is not pride, not tradition, but necessity. The path to Samarkand is long, dangerous, filled with fiends and treacherous terrain and the ever-present threat of sin itself. Each summoner is expected to take on guardians, people who swear, formally, to protect them, to fight for them, to give their lives, if necessary, so that the summoner might reach their destination. These are not servants, not employees. Guardians enter into something deeper, a bond of duty and loyalty that supersedes normal relationships. They pledge themselves completely to the summoner's protection and success. Some guardians are hired warriors, skilled fighters seeking purpose or redemption. Some are childhood friends, people who love the summoner and cannot bear to let them walk this path alone. Some are members of the warrior monks of Yevon, assigned by the Church itself. But regardless of their origin, once they take the oath, they are guardians. Their life belongs to the pilgrimage. Their purpose is singular. Get the summoner to Samarkand. Whatever it takes. Picture this small group, walking across Spira together. The summoner, young, bearing a burden too heavy for anyone to carry. And their guardians, surrounding them, protecting them, sharing the weight in the only way they can. By the time a pilgrimage reaches its end, these people have become family, have shared danger and triumph, have saved each other's lives countless times. The bonds formed are deeper than blood, stronger than steel. And yet, they all know, the guardians know, that they are escorting someone they love, to their death. That protection only lasts until Samarkand. That their success means losing the person they have sworn to protect. It is a loyalty defined by grief, a protection that culminates in loss, a bond that can only end in sorrow. Let this truth rest gently, understanding the terrible beauty of such devotion. Our fourth understanding speaks of how summoners are seen. Walk through any town in Spira when a summoner passes through. Watch how people react. See them emerge from their homes. Kneel in the streets. Reach out trembling hands just to touch the summoner's robe. Summoners are treated as living saints. Revered. Worshipped. Beloved beyond measure. Children are brought forward to receive blessings. The sick hope for healing through proximity. The faithful weep simply at the sight of someone who has chosen this path. Gifts are offered. Prayers are spoken. Every kindness, every comfort, every honor is extended. Because summoners offer hope. In a world defined by the spiral of death, by inevitable catastrophe, by the certainty that sin will return, summoners offer the possibility of peace. Of 10 years without fear. Of a calm where children can grow up without nightmares. And so, they are celebrated. Honored. Placed on pedestals. Treated as if they are already divine. Already more than human. But beneath the celebration, beneath the reverence and the tears of gratitude, everyone quietly understands the truth. Everyone knows what the pilgrimage really means. Summoners are living saints, but the emphasis is on living. Present tense. Temporary. Because their journey almost always ends in their death. This is not speculation. Not pessimism. Just truth. Statistical. Historical. Inevitable. Perhaps 1 in 10 summoners who begin the pilgrimage actually complete it. The rest fall to fiends. To the dangers of the path. To simple exhaustion. And those who do reach Sanarkand, who do perform the final summoning, die in the performing. So when people kneel before a summoner, when they weep and pray and bless them, there is always this undercurrent. This knowledge. We are honoring someone who is already gone. Already dead. Already a ghost, who simply hasn't faded yet. The summoner smiles. Accepts the blessing. Thanks the faithful. And carries the weight of knowing that every person who kneels before them is saying goodbye. Breathe slowly, feeling the loneliness of being so loved, because you are so certainly doomed. And now, our fifth truth speaks of another duty. But summoners do not only bring hope through their pilgrimage. They serve another purpose. Perform another vital function. One that is needed, constantly, in a world where sin creates death wherever it passes. Summoners are responsible for sendings. Those beautiful, mournful ceremonies that guide the dead's fireflies to the far plane. When sin attacks, when fiends kill, when people die by any means in this dangerous world, their spirits can linger. The fireflies that compose their essence, their consciousness, their soul, can remain. Confused. Unable to move on. Slowly losing themselves. Without ascending, the dead become fiends. The grief and confusion of death, twisted by lingering fireflies, manifests as monsters. Dangerous. Aggressive. Lost. This is why sending ceremonies are so important. So necessary. So deeply woven into Spira's culture. And summoners, with their ability to commune with the spiritual realm, with their sensitivity to fireflies and the boundary between life and death, they perform these ceremonies. They dance the sacred dance. They guide the dead home. Picture it. A beach where sin has attacked. Bodies scattered. Survivors weeping. And a summoner arrives, young, exhausted from their own journey, but they do not rest. They begin the sending. They dance. Graceful movements filled with purpose. Their staff moving in precise patterns. And as they dance, the fireflies respond. Rising from the dead like golden fireflies. Swirling. Gathering. Following the summoner's movements. And then, guided by will and ritual and ancient knowledge, the fireflies drift away. Toward the far plane. Toward rest. Toward whatever lies beyond. The dance ends. The dead are sent. The danger of fiends is lessened. The survivors can mourn, knowing their loved ones will not become monsters. Will not forget themselves. Will rest peacefully. This is exhausting work. Spiritually draining. Each sending takes something from the summoner. But they do it anyway. Because it is needed. Because no one else can. Because this too, is their burden to bear. Summoners bring hope through their pilgrimage. And peace through their sendings. They stand between the living and the dead, serving both, belonging fully to neither. Let this understanding settle, gently, seeing the full weight of what summoners carry. Let us pause, in recognition. We have walked through the life of a summoner tonight. From their rare ability, to their sanctioned journey, to their loyal guardians, to how they are revered, to their duty to the dead. These are not simple heroes. Not distant figures of legend. They are young people, often teenagers, making an impossible choice. To give their life, so others might have peace. To walk towards certain death, so children they will never meet might grow up in safety. And so, we conclude this sixth journey, through the truth of summoners. Those rare individuals who bear humanity's hope on their shoulders, who are loved because they are dying, who dance for the dead while walking toward their own death. Let these truths rest softly. Let them settle like evening mist. You need not carry them as weights. Simply, understand them, honor them, and then, release them into rest. More awaits, in future segments. More stories to tell. More threads to follow. But for now, breathe deeply, slowly, and rest, knowing that even in the darkest systems, there are people who choose sacrifice, who choose love, who choose to bear impossible burdens, so that others might have even a moment of peace. Welcome back to our journey through Spira's deepest truths. Settle in, even deeper now. Tonight we explore something profound. Something that exists at the boundary between life and death, between sacrifice and power, between humanity and divinity. Tonight, we speak of the fate, and the eons they dream into being. Breathe slowly, and let us understand. Our first truth speaks of transformation. The fate are not objects, not magical artifacts, not ancient relics imbued with power through some forgotten ritual. The fate are humans. All were humans. People who lived and breathed, who had names, families, dreams of their own. People who were sacrificed and sealed into stone statues, so their dreaming souls could power eons. Imagine this. Imagine choosing, or being chosen, to give up everything. Your body, your life, your future, to become a living dream. Forever. Locked in stone. Conscious but immobile. Aware but unchanging. Dreaming, eternally, so that others might call upon your power. Many fate were willing. They chose this. During or shortly after the Machina War, when the world was ending, when Bavel's forces were destroying everything, when sin first began to ravage Spira, entire groups of people chose this transformation. Chose death over being destroyed. Chose to become something useful. Something that might help future generations fight back. Something that would endure. It was an act of tremendous sacrifice. Of faith. Of hope that their suffering, their permanent imprisonment in stone, would serve some greater purpose. But willing or not, whether they chose freely or were coerced by desperate circumstances, the transformation is the same. The person enters a chamber. Rituals are performed. And slowly, inexorably, their body becomes stone. Their consciousness becomes dream. Their identity becomes something else. Something eternal. Something trapped. The fate remain aware. At least partially. They dream. They feel summoners connecting to them. They know when their eon is called forth. They experience, in some fashion, the passage of centuries. Imagine that existence. Imagine being stone. Dreaming. For 1,000 years. Let this settle, gently, understanding the magnitude of what the fate have endured. Our second understanding reveals where they rest. The fate are not hidden away. Not buried in forgotten places. They are central to Spira's spiritual life. Honored. Revered. Protected. Each major temple in Spira contains at least one fate statue. These temples, scattered across the world, from Besaid to Kilika to Jos to Makalania, each one houses a dreaming soul in stone. The temples are beautiful. Sacred. Built with care and maintained with devotion. Priests tend them. Pilgrims visit them. And summoners must prove themselves to them. The trials of the temple. You have perhaps heard of these. Complex puzzles. Magical barriers. Challenges that test intelligence, patience, worthiness. Summoners must complete these trials to reach the cloister of trials, to stand before the fate, to request the bond that will allow them to call forth that fate's eon. But here is what many don't fully understand. The trials are not arbitrary. Not just tradition or bureaucracy. They serve a purpose. They are partially about proving the summoner's worthiness to that specific fate. About demonstrating dedication. Perseverance. The qualities that would make someone deserving of the fate's eternal service. Because the fate have agency. Will. They can refuse. They can reject a summoner who they find unworthy. The trials ensure, or at least suggest, that those who reach the inner chamber have earned the right to ask. And when a summoner does reach that inner sanctum, stands before the statue, and makes their request, the fate responds. The bond forms. And from that moment, until the summoner's death, they are connected. Summoner and fate. Dreamer and dreamed. Breathe slowly, picturing these temples, these sacred spaces where the living meet the eternally dreaming. Our third truth introduces a voice. Among all the fate, all the dreaming souls locked in stone, one speaks more clearly than the others. One reaches out. One serves as a voice for the collective. A boy. Young. Perhaps 10 or 11 years old when he was transformed. Now, ageless. Eternal. Dreaming the most powerful eon of all. The boy who appears to Titus in dreams is the fate of Bahamut, the Dragon King, the mightiest eon. And this child spirit, this young soul that has endured centuries of dreaming, acts as the main voice of the fate collective. He appears in Titus's dreams, speaks to him, not always clearly, not always in ways that make immediate sense. Because how does one explain, in simple terms, truths that span 1,000 years? How does a child, even an eternal one, articulate the exhaustion of dreaming forever? But he tries. He reaches out. He warns. He guides. He asks. Because the fate have grown tired. So very tired. Centuries of constant summoning. Of being called forth again and again. Of powering eons. Of fueling Yevon's endless cycle. Of never resting. Never truly dying. Never moving on to whatever lies beyond. They are trapped. Not just in stone, but in the cycle itself. As long as Yevon endures, as long as the system continues, the fate must keep dreaming. Must keep powering dreams and Arkand. Must keep allowing themselves to be transformed into final eons that become sin. And so, the boy asks, pleads, with Titus, with Yuna, with their entire group, please, end Yevon's cycle. Break the spiral. Free us. Let us finally, rest. It is a desperate request. From beings who have sacrificed everything. Who have endured longer than any human should. Who just want permission to stop. To end. To sleep, truly, for the first time in a millennium. Let this truth rest, feeling the weariness of eternal dreaming, the exhaustion of souls that have served too long. Our fourth understanding reveals the nature of eons themselves. Now let us turn our attention to what the fate create. The eons. Those magnificent beings that summoners call forth in battle. Creatures of power and beauty and terrible strength. Eons are not separate entities. Not independent beings that happen to answer a summoner's call. They are the physical manifestations of the fate's dreams. Shaped by the memories and expectations of the person who became the fate. Think about this. The fate dreams. And in that dream, they imagine themselves as something more. Something powerful. Something that can fight. That can protect. That can matter. Perhaps they remember what they loved in life. Perhaps they imagine what they wish they had been. Perhaps they simply dream, and the dream takes form based on who they were, who they wanted to be. And so, each eon is unique. Veilful, bird-like and graceful. Ifrit, burning with eternal flame. Shiva, cold and beautiful. Bahamut, the Dragon King. Each one reflects, in some way, the soul that dreams it into being. In theory, the same fate could produce different-looking eons for different summoners. The dream might shift, might adapt to the summoner's own expectations and needs. But in practice, in the world as it exists, each fate produces one iconic form. One consistent manifestation. The dream has solidified over centuries into a specific shape. These eons are not just weapons. Not just tools. They are extensions of the fate. When a summoner calls an eon, they are asking that dreaming soul to manifest. To take physical form. To fight on their behalf. And here, in this world, in this story, eons are unique. They are fully controllable. When summoned, they replace the entire party. The summoner's companions fade back. And the eon stands alone. Fighting. Following commands. Acting as a complete party member, shaped from dreams. This is intimate. Personal. The summoner directs the fate's dream. Shapes how it fights. Develops strategy around its strengths. It is a collaboration between the living and the eternally dreaming. And the more a summoner uses an eon, the stronger it becomes. This reflects the deepening bond between summoner and fate. Trust building. Understanding growing. The dream becoming more vivid, more powerful, more responsive. Until summoner and eon move as one. Think as one. Fight as one. Let this understanding settle, seeing eons not as servants, but as partners, as dreaming souls given form and purpose. And now, Our fifth truth speaks of the darkest transformation. But there is one eon that is different. One that stands apart from all others. The final eon. This is not found in a temple. Not granted by an ancient fate. Not the product of a sacrifice made centuries ago. The final eon is created from a person deeply connected to the summoner. Someone they love. Someone who loves them. A friend. A guardian. Sometimes, a family member. That person's soul becomes a special fate. Not sealed in stone and left in a temple. But transformed. Bound to the summoner. Connected so deeply that their combined power, summoner and beloved, creates an eon powerful enough to defeat sin itself. This is the truth behind the final summoning. The secret that the church hides. That the fate know. That every high summoner eventually discovers. To defeat sin, you must sacrifice someone you love. Someone must become your final eon. Must give up their humanity. Their future. Their very existence as a person. And when that final eon defeats sin, when it accomplishes the impossible and brings the calm, Yevon possesses it. Takes control. Uses it as the core of the next sin. The beloved becomes the monster. The sacrifice becomes the very thing it died to defeat. This is why Jectus sin. Why Titus's father, transformed into Braska's final eon, became the armored leviathan that has terrorized Spira for the past 10 years. The final eon is not salvation. It is transformation. From person, to fate, to eon, to sin. The cycle perpetuating itself through love. Through sacrifice. Through the bonds that should be most sacred, twisted into fuel for the spiral of death. Breathe through this, feeling the tragedy of it. The terrible cleverness of a system that uses love as its mechanism. That turns the deepest bonds into chains. Let us pause, in this understanding. We have traveled deep tonight. Into the nature of fate and eons. Into the truth of eternal dreaming and manifestations of power. Into the bonds between summoner and fate, and the terrible transformation of the final eon. These truths are heavy, dark, but there is something important in understanding them. In seeing how even the most beautiful magic, the most powerful bonds, can be part of a system of suffering. The fates sacrifice themselves willingly. The eons are magnificent. The bonds between summoner and fate are real and profound. And yet, all of it feeds the cycle. All of it perpetuates the spiral. Even sacrifice can be exploited. Even love can be weaponized. And so, we conclude this seventh journey, through the dreaming and the dreamed. Through stone statues that were once people. Through eons that are manifestations of ancient hopes. Through bonds that deepen with use. And through the darkest secret, that the final eon becomes sin. Let these truths settle, like leaves falling to still water. You need not carry them as burdens. Simply, acknowledge them, understand them, and then, let them rest. More awaits, in future segments. More threads to follow. More pieces of this vast puzzle. But for now, breathe deeply, slowly, and rest, knowing that even souls trapped in stone, still dream of freedom. That even ancient sacrifices, can grow weary. That even the most powerful magic, comes at a cost. Rest, and let these truths, fade gently, into sleep. Welcome back, once more, to Spira's story. Let yourself sink deeper into rest. Tonight we walk a path. A sacred path. One that countless summoners have walked before, and that leads, always, to the same destination. Tonight, we follow the pilgrimage. From beginning, to inevitable end. Breathe slowly, and let us walk together. Our first truth, maps the journey. The pilgrimage is not a wandering. Not an aimless quest where the summoner chooses their own path. No. It follows a fixed route. Ancient. Prescribed. The same path walked by every summoner who has ever sought to defeat sin. It begins in the outlying islands. Besaid, small and remote, where many young summoners first receive their calling. Then to Kilika, island of storms and ancient jungle temples. From there to the mainland, to Jos, where lightning crackles eternally and Machina remnants sleep beneath the earth. Then deeper into Spira's heart. To Macalania, temple of ice, where frozen beauty masks profound cold. To Bevel, the great city, seat of Yevon's power, temple of grandeur and authority. And beyond, past the calm lands, up the treacherous slopes of Mount Gagazet, to the far edge of the world. To Zanarkand's ruins. The end. The culmination. The place where the journey must conclude. Each location has its temple. Its fate. Its trials. The route is sacred not just because of tradition, but because of necessity. Each temple along the path holds an eon. Each fate must be claimed. Each bond must be formed. Building power. Building strength. Building toward the moment when the summoner will face sin. Picture this journey. Weeks. Months. Walking across an entire world. Through villages that celebrate your arrival. Past ruins that whisper of failure. Across landscapes both beautiful and treacherous. Always moving forward. Always progressing towards Anarkand. The path is known. The destination is certain. Only the outcome remains in doubt. Let this route settle in your mind, seeing it stretch across Spira like a thread, connecting temples, connecting summoners across time, all walking the same sacred road. Our second understanding reveals the framing of purpose. But why does the summoner walk this path? What is the pilgrimage, truly, in the eyes of Yevon? In the understanding of the faithful? The pilgrimage is framed as an act of atonement. Not just for the summoner. Not a personal quest for glory or power or even to save the world in some heroic sense. No. The pilgrimage is atonement on behalf of all Spira. The teachings say that sin exists because of humanity's sins. Because of their use of machina. Their hubris. Their failures to live according to Yevon's precepts. Sin is punishment. And the pilgrimage, the final summoning, is how humanity atones. The summoner carries the weight of everyone's sins. Every person who ever used a forbidden machine. Every moment of doubt in Yevon's teachings. Every failure to pray with sufficient devotion. The summoner takes all of this, all of humanity's collective guilt, and carries it to Zanarkand. And there, through the ultimate sacrifice, they atone. They pay the price. They offer their life, so that everyone else might have peace. This is how Yevon frames it. Not as a fight against an external enemy. Not as a battle between good and evil. But as a spiritual transaction. Sin for atonement. Guilt for sacrifice. Suffering for temporary redemption. It places the entire moral weight of the cycle on the summoner. Makes their death, not just necessary, but deserved. Required. The price that must be paid. And it absolves everyone else. All of Spira can continue as they are. Can keep their small sins. Can fail to be perfect. Because the summoner will atone for them. Will pay their debt. Will die so they don't have to. It is brilliant theology. For a system that requires sacrifice. For a church that needs to maintain control. For a cycle that must perpetuate itself. The summoner is not a hero. The summoner is a sin offering. Walking, willingly, to the altar. Breathe through this, understanding how purpose can be shaped, how meaning can be imposed, how even sacrifice can be controlled through framing. Our third truth speaks of progress and power. But let us return to the practical. To what happens at each temple along the route. The summoner arrives. The people celebrate. Prayers are offered. And then, the real work begins. The cloister of trials. Each temple has one. Each is different. Puzzles of light and magic. Barriers that respond to spheres placed in precise patterns. Challenges that test wit and patience and determination. The summoner enters. Often alone. Sometimes with one guardian permitted to accompany them. And they solve the trials. Navigate the puzzles. Prove themselves worthy. And at the end, in the innermost chamber, they find the fate. The statue. The dreaming soul that has waited, perhaps for centuries, for a summoner to arrive. The summoner approaches. Kneels. Opens their heart and mind. And communion begins. It is not described in detail. Perhaps it cannot be. The meeting of consciousness. The touching of souls. The formation of a bond that transcends normal human connection. But when the summoner emerges, they carry something new. A new eon. Another ally they can call upon. Another manifestation of ancient power now bound to their will. Each temple completed marks official progress on the journey. The summoner has one more eon. One more tool for the battle ahead. One step closer to Zanarkand. And the people celebrate again. Mark the moment. Record it in their histories. Another summoner has claimed another eon. The pilgrimage continues. Hope endures. It is a journey measured in temples. In fate claimed. In bonds formed. Each one a milestone. Each one bringing the summoner closer to their purpose and their end. Let this settle, understanding how progress is measured, how achievement is marked, on a journey that leads to death. Our fourth understanding speaks of growing awareness. There is something that happens as the pilgrimage progresses. Something that cannot be taught. Cannot be explained beforehand. Only, gradually, painfully, understood. The closer a summoner gets to Zanarkand, the clearer it becomes to seasoned guardians that they are walking toward a planned sacrifice. At first, in Besaid, in the early days, there is hope. Perhaps naivety. The summoner is young. The guardians are determined. They will protect their charge. They will succeed where others have failed. Perhaps this summoner will be different. But as temples are completed, as the journey continues, as they speak with other guardians, other priests, other people who have watched pilgrimages before, the truth seeps in. Slowly. Like water through stone. This is not a journey with an uncertain end. This is not a quest where the summoner might return home victorious and alive. The pilgrimage has one conclusion. Has always had one conclusion. Will always have one conclusion. The summoner will die. Either on the journey, or at its end. The guardians realize they are not protecting someone. They are escorting them. To their execution. Helping them reach the place where they will die. Removing obstacles so the sacrifice can be completed smoothly. And they continue anyway. Because they love the summoner. Because they have sworn an oath. Because turning back is unthinkable. But the joy leaches from the journey. Replaced by a growing dread. A grief that begins before death. A mourning that starts while the summoner still lives. The summoner often understands this too. Sees it in their guardian's eyes. Feels the shift in atmosphere. Knows that everyone around them has realized what this really is. And still they continue. What else can they do? Turn back? Abandon spirit to sin? Refuse the role they have accepted? The path only goes one direction. Towards Zanarkand. Toward sacrifice. Toward the end. Breathe slowly, feeling the weight of this realization, the grief of walking knowingly toward inevitable loss. Our fifth truth introduces the gatekeeper. And at the end of the journey, in the Zanarkand dome, in the ruins of the holy city, there waits a figure. Unaleska. First summoner to defeat sin. The original hero. The one who showed that it was possible. Who gave Spira hope. Who began the cycle of calms. She remains. Not as a living woman. But as an unsent. A spirit that has refused to move on. That has stayed, for 1,000 years, in the Zanarkand dome. Serving as high priestess of the system. Guardian of the final summoning. Explainer of the truth that every summoner must eventually face. Picture her. Ancient. Beautiful in a terrible way. Unsent but powerful. More ghost than woman. More concept than person. She has performed this role so many times. Explained the truth to so many summoners. Watched so many accept their fate. She speaks with the authority of one who has done it. Who knows what the final summoning requires. Who understands the price. And she offers. Explains. One of the summoner's guardians must become the final eon. Must sacrifice themselves. Transform into a fate. Become the weapon powerful enough to defeat sin. This is the truth she reveals. The secret that the church hides until it is too late to turn back. The reason the pilgrimage requires guardians who love the summoner. Because love is necessary. The final eon must come from deep connection. From profound bond. From someone who would willingly die for the summoner's success. Unaleska has done this 1,000 times. Explained it 1,000 times. Watched the realization dawn. Watched guardians volunteer. Watched summoners accept. Watched the transformation. Watched the sacrifice. She is the system incarnate. The eternal guardian of false hope. The one who ensures the cycle continues. Generation after generation. Summoner after summoner. And she does not doubt. Does not question. Does not see anything wrong. This is how it must be. This is how it has always been. This is the price of peace. Let this settle. Understanding how even heroes can become jailers. How even sacrifice can become systematic. And now, our sixth truth speaks of rejection. But what if a summoner says no? What if, after everything, after walking the entire pilgrimage, after claiming every eon, after reaching Zanarkand and hearing the truth, the summoner rejects the final summoning? This is what Una does. Refuses. Says no. Will not sacrifice a guardian. Will not perpetuate the cycle. Will not accept that this is the only way. And this is considered blasphemy. Not just by Unaleska, but by the entire system. By 1,000 years of tradition. By the accepted way Spira has sought temporary peace. By every summoner who came before and accepted the bargain. To reject the final summoning is to say, all those deaths were pointless. All those sacrifices were based on a lie. All those temporary calms were not worth the price. It is to challenge not just Unalesca, not just Yevon, but the entire moral structure of Spira, the foundation of how people understand suffering and sacrifice and hope. Unalesca is genuinely shocked, perhaps even offended. This has never happened. No summoner who has come this far has ever refused. They have always accepted, always sacrificed, always completed the cycle. To say no is to break the pattern, to suggest there might be another way, to choose, impossibly, hope over certainty, the unknown over the established, a chance at real freedom over guaranteed temporary peace. It is the most radical act imaginable. Not fighting sin, but refusing to fight it on the terms that have been set. Refusing to participate in the cycle. Saying, we will find another way, or we will die trying. But we will not feed this system anymore. Breathe through this, feeling the courage it takes to reject what everyone accepts, to refuse what everyone expects, to say no when the entire world says yes. Let us pause at the end of the pilgrimage. We have walked the sacred route tonight, from Besaid to Zanarkand, through temples and trials, through growing awareness and eventual truth, to the moment of rejection. The pilgrimage is the heart of Spira's system, the mechanism by which the cycle perpetuates, the path every summoner walks, the journey that has defined 1,000 years. And yet, it can be refused. The pattern can be broken. The sacrifice can be rejected. Not easily, not without consequence. But, it can be done. And so, we conclude this 8th journey, through the pilgrimage itself. Through the fixed route and framed purpose. Through temples and growing awareness. Through Unalesca's ancient gatekeeping. And through the radical act of rejection. Let these truths settle, like dust after a long journey. You need not carry them as burdens. Simply, acknowledge them, understand them, and then, let them rest. More awaits, in future segments. But for now, the pilgrimage is complete. The path has been walked. The truth has been revealed. And the choice has been made. Breathe deeply, slowly, and rest, knowing that even the most sacred paths can be left behind. That even the oldest systems can be refused. That even blasphemy can be courage. Rest, and let these truths fade gently into sleep. Welcome back to Spira's story. Tonight we turn from systems and cycles, from ancient histories and sacred roots, to something more immediate, more personal. Tonight, we speak of people, the individuals who walk through this story, who carry its weight, who make choices that will reshape their world. Breathe slowly, and let us meet them. Our first truth speaks of impossible existence. Titus, a young man, 17 years old, confident, athletic, a star blitzball player from Zanarkand, a city of lights and crowds, a place where sin is just a story, where life is normal, modern, safe, except Zanarkand shouldn't exist. Titus's entire world, his city, his life, his memories, all of it is sustained by the fate's continuous summoning. Titus is effectively a living dream. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally. He exists because the fate dreamed him into being. Every thought, every memory, every moment of his 17 years, all of it is part of Dreams Zanarkand, part of the summon that has continued for 1,000 years. He doesn't know this. How could he? Everything feels real to him. The bruises from blitzball practice, the sound of crowds cheering, the complicated relationship with his father, all of it is real to him. But it rests on a foundation of collective dreaming. If the fates stop, if the summon ends, Titus will cease to exist. Not die. Not in any conventional sense. Simply, stop being. Return to the dream. Fade like morning mist when the sun rises. This is his nature. His truth. His terrible, beautiful impossibility. He is real. And he is not real. Both truths, existing simultaneously, until the moment when one must give way to the other. Let this settle, understanding the fragility of his existence, the tragedy woven into his very being. Our second understanding speaks of fathers and sons. Titus's relationship with Jekt is complicated, painful, built from years of verbal and emotional abuse. A father who mocked, who belittled, who drank too much and cared too little, who made his son feel small, inadequate, never enough. Titus hates him. This is not too strong a word. He carries that hatred like a weight, defines himself against his father, tries desperately to be nothing like him, to prove that he is better, that he matters, that he exists beyond being Jecht's son. But the journey through Spira, the slow revelation of truth, forces something different. Forces Titus to confront uncomfortable possibilities. That Jecht did care, in his own broken way, through his own damaged understanding of what it means to be a father. That the drinking and the mockery and the distance were not because Titus didn't matter, but because Jecht never learned to show love healthily. That Jecht was trapped in his own cycle, of trying to be strong, of thinking that toughness was love, of not knowing, not understanding, how his words landed, how deeply they cut, how permanent the damage would be. This doesn't excuse it, doesn't make it right. Abuse is abuse, regardless of intention, but it complicates it, makes it human, makes it sad, rather than simply cruel. Titus must carry this, must hold both truths, that his father hurt him, and that his father loved him, that the pain was real, and that it came from someone who was, himself, in pain. It is not reconciliation, not forgiveness in any simple sense, but understanding, the hardest kind, the kind that doesn't absolve, but acknowledges, that sees clearly, without the comfort of simple hatred. Breathe through this, feeling how complicated family can be, how damage and love can coexist, how healing requires holding multiple truths at once. Our third truth speaks of heritage and revolution. Una, the summoner at the heart of this story. Young, 20 years old, gentle in manner but fierce in conviction. The person everyone looks to, everyone hopes in, everyone loves. She is the daughter of High Summoner Braskar, a hero, a legend, the man who defeated Sin 10 years ago and brought the last calm. His legacy is enormous. Everyone knows his name. Everyone reveres his sacrifice. But her mother was Ulped, one of the machine-using outcasts, the people Yevon calls heretics, the tribe that most of Spira views with suspicion at best, hatred at worst. This makes Una 1/4 Ulped. Mixed heritage in a world that values purity. Different. Other. Marked by it. Her mismatched eyes, one blue, one green, a visible sign of her mixed blood. Beautiful. Unusual. And to some, proof of her outsider status. She carries this duality. Daughter of a high summoner. Granddaughter of heretics. Beloved by Yevon. Connected to those Yevon rejects. She exists in the space between. Belongs fully to neither side. Or perhaps, belongs to both. And this, perhaps, is part of what enables her eventual choice. Because Una's decision to reject the final summoning, to refuse Unalesca, to seek a way to end sin permanently rather than temporarily, this transforms her. From a dutiful believer of Yevon, into a revolutionary figure in Spira's history. She does not simply oppose the church. She challenges the fundamental bargain that has sustained Spira for 1,000 years. She says, we will not sacrifice anymore. We will not accept that this is the only way. We will find something better. Or die trying. This is not rebellion born from anger. Not rejection from spite. But revolution from love. From refusing to accept that the people she cares about, the guardians who have walked beside her, should have to die to perpetuate a system that ultimately solves nothing. She becomes what Spira needs. Not another martyr. But someone willing to imagine, and fight for, actual change. Let this truth rest, understanding how identity shapes choices, how heritage can be strength, how the greatest revolutionaries often come from the spaces between. Our fourth understanding speaks of the unsent guide. Oren, legendary guardian, survivor of Braskar's pilgrimage, witness to the truth, living monument to perseverance and duty. Except, he is not living. Not anymore. Oren died 10 years before the game begins. In Zanarkand. After Braskar became Sin. After the truth was revealed. After Jecht was transformed into the final Eon. In that moment of horror and realization, Oren attacked Unalesca. Attacked the system itself. In rage. In grief. In the desperate need to do something, anything, to strike back at the lie. And she killed him for it. One strike. And the legendary guardian fell. But Oren did not move on. Did not allow himself to be sent to the far plane. Remained as an unsent. A spirit. A ghost with purpose. Sustained by sheer will and unfulfilled promises. He promised Braskar he would watch over Una. Promised Jecht he would guide Titus. 2 promises, made to dying friends, that could not be kept from beyond death. And so, he stayed. For 10 years. Unsent. Slowly gathering strength. Watching Yuna grow. Waiting for the right moment. And when Sin attacked dreams and Arkand, when Titus was pulled into Spira, Orin was there. Ready. Beginning the fulfillment of promises a decade in the making. He guides them. Both of them. With the weight of experience. With knowledge of the truth. With the grim determination of someone who has already lost everything, and has nothing left to lose. Orin is not trying to save himself. His chance for life ended years ago. He is not even trying to save Spira, not in the conventional sense. He is trying to free it. To give Yuna and Titus the chance he and his friends never had. To ensure that this time, this pilgrimage, ends differently. He is a ghost with a mission. A memory with purpose. An unsent who refuses to rest, until his promises are fulfilled. Let this settle, understanding how duty can transcend death, how promises can sustain existence, how even ghosts can choose their purpose. Our fifth truth speaks of faith breaking. Waka, captain of the Besaid Aurochs blitzball team. Big brother figure. Loyal friend. And devout follower of Yevon. The teachings guide everything he does. Every choice. Every judgment. Every understanding of right and wrong. He believes. Deeply. Simply. Without question. Machina are bad because they anger Sin. The Olbhead are heretics because they use Machina. Yevon's teachings are true because they are Yevon's teachings. It is circular. Complete. Unexamined. But the journey, the slow revelation of truth, breaks this faith. Piece by piece. Lie by lie. He learns that the church is corrupt. That Maestas are unsent. That Yevon's history is false. That the Olbhead, including his own summoner's family, are not evil. Just different. Just trying to survive in a world that hates them for using the tools that could save them. Everything he believed, crumbles. And Waka must reconstruct himself. Must figure out who he is, when the structure that defined him is revealed as lies. It is painful. Disorienting. Like losing the ground beneath your feet. But also, necessary. Because blind faith, however comforting, is still blindness. Waka must learn to see. To think. To question. To choose his beliefs rather than inheriting them. It makes him more human. More whole. Even as it makes him more uncertain. Let this truth rest, understanding how faith can be both shelter and prison, how losing belief can hurt, while being necessary for growth. Our sixth understanding speaks of loss shaping person. Waka's younger brother was named Chapu. He was kind, brave, full of life. And he died. Killed by Sin. Just another casualty in an endless war. But the circumstances matter. Chapu chose to use a Machina weapon instead of a traditional one. Broke from Yevon's teachings. Thought that better tools might give him an edge. Might help him survive. And he died anyway. Perhaps the Machina attracted Sin. Perhaps it was just chance. But in Waka's mind, the connection is clear. His brother broke the teachings. And his brother died. Therefore, the teachings are right. Machina kill. The Olbhead, who make Machina, are responsible. This fuels Waka's early hatred. Makes it personal. Not just religious doctrine, but grief seeking a target. Anger that needs somewhere to land. And the Olbhead are there. Easy to blame. Easy to hate. Except, Lulu loved Chapu too. Was planning to marry him. Lost her future when he died. And she doesn't hate the Olbhead. Doesn't blame Machina. Just, grieves. Carries the loss. Channels it into protecting Yuna. Into making sure another person she loves, doesn't die the same way. Lulu helped raise Yuna in Besaid. Along with Waka. The three of them, bonded by loss. By the absence of Chapu. By the need to create family from what remained. Lulu's grief drives her stern demeanor. Her controlled emotions. She has lost before. She will not lose carelessly again. Every action is measured. Every risk calculated. She judges harshly, because harsh judgment might keep people alive. But beneath the severity, there is genuine protectiveness. Real love. She is hard, because she cares too much. Because she cannot bear more loss. Her black mage role, her heavy use of dolls as weapons, visually contrasts with this caretaker role. She looks dangerous. Gothic. Dark. But she is the most nurturing of the guardians. The most maternal. The one who sees needs before they are spoken. It is a beautiful contradiction. Harshness as care. Judgment as protection. Severity as love. Breathe slowly, understanding how loss shapes us, how grief can become purpose, how the hardest exteriors often protect the most tender hearts. And now, our seventh truth, speaks of shame and silence. Kimari Ronso. Tall. Blue-skinned. Feline features. A member of a proud warrior race that values strength above all. The Ronso of Mount Gagazet. Fierce. Honorable. Traditional. But Kimari has a broken horn. In Ronso culture, in the values of his people, this is a grave mark of shame. Evidence of defeat. Of inadequacy. Of failure to defend oneself. For this, he was exiled. Cast out from his people. Made to wander. Alone. Carrying the physical mark of his Dishina. Unable to return. Unable to find place among his own kind. It is this exile, this wandering, that eventually enables him to meet Orin. To find new purpose. To become Yuna's guardian. Not from birth, but from childhood. Watching over her. Protecting her. Speaking little but being always present. Kimari is silent. Not because he has nothing to say, but because words are not his way. He protects through presence. Through action. Through being there when needed. Asking nothing. Expecting nothing. Simply, serving. His broken horn is shame to the Ronso. But to Yuna, to those who know him, it is just part of who he is. Not evidence of failure. Just a mark. A story. A reminder that everyone carries wounds. And perhaps his exile was not ending, but beginning. Perhaps being cast out from one family allowed him to find another. To become what Yuna needed. What Orin asked. What he himself chose to be. Let this truth settle, understanding how shame can be reframed, how exile can become liberation, how silence can be its own form of love. Let us pause with these people. We have met them now, not as archetypes, not as roles, but as individuals. Complex, wounded, growing, each carrying their own pain, their own history, their own reasons for walking this path. Titus the dream, Yuna the revolutionary, Orin the unsent, Waka the believer losing faith, Lulu the stern caretaker, Kimari the shamed guardian. Together, they are more than the sum of their parts. They are family, found, chosen, bound by shared purpose and growing love. And so, we conclude this ninth journey, through the people at the heart of the story. Through their origins and their pain. Through what shapes them and what they choose to become. Let these lives rest gently in your mind. You need not carry them as burdens. Simply, acknowledge them, understand them, and then, let them be. More awaits, in future segments. More truths to explore. More pieces to place. But for now, breathe deeply, slowly, and rest, knowing that even in impossible circumstances, people choose. People grow. People become something more than what they were given. Rest, and let these stories fade gently into sleep. Welcome back to the continuing story. Let yourself sink deeper still. Tonight we expand our understanding. Meet more people who shape this world. Some through love. Some through sacrifice. Some through darkness. Breathe slowly, and let us explore these lives. Our first truth speaks of family and prevention. Riku. Young. Energetic. An old-head salvager who spends her days diving into the ocean's depths. Recovering machina from sunken ships. Treasure hunting. Living the practical, technological life that most of Spira views as heresy. But Riku is more than a salvager. More than a machine user. More than a representative of her people. She is Yuna's cousin. Family. Connected by blood through Yuna's old-head mother. And when she learns that Yuna has begun a pilgrimage, when she understands what that means, what it will lead to, she joins as a guardian. Not for glory. Not for faith. Not because she believes in Yevon or the teachings or the traditional path. She joins specifically to prevent Yuna from sacrificing herself through the final summoning. This is her purpose. Her mission. Keep Yuna alive. Find another way. Refuse to accept that her cousin, her family, must die to perpetuate a system that Riku knows is broken. Her use of machina makes this position clear. She doesn't hide it. Doesn't apologize for it. She uses grenades and mixes chemicals and employs technology openly. And her easygoing nature, her cheerfulness, her refusal to be solemn about sacred things, this all contrasts sharply with Yevon's teachings. She is a bridge. Between Spira's oppressed Ulbhead minority and the rest of the party. Between those who follow the teachings and those who reject them. Between faith and pragmatism. between accepting death and fighting for life. Riku represents possibility. The idea that maybe, just maybe, there is another way. That technology isn't evil. That the Olbhead aren't heretics. That Yuna doesn't have to die. She brings hope. Not the grim hope of temporary peace bought with sacrifice, but the bright hope of survival, of change, of choosing life over tradition. Let this truth settle, understanding how family drives action, how love refuses to accept the unacceptable, how sometimes the outsider sees most clearly. Our second understanding speaks of how a father becomes a monster. We have spoken of Jecht before, but let us trace his path more clearly, more completely. In Dream Zanarkand, he is a legendary blitzball player. The best. Famous. Celebrated. Living a life of acclaim and, if we're honest, too much drinking and too little emotional awareness. Then, during a training voyage, something happens. He is pulled through strange waters. Transported. Arriving impossibly in Spira. A world he doesn't understand. Where his Zanarkand is just ruins. Where sin is real. Where nothing makes sense. This is years before Tidus makes the same journey. Jecht arrives alone. Lost. Confused. Gradually realizing that returning home might not be possible. That his wife and son are, somewhere else. Unreachable. And in this confusion, this displacement, he meets Braskar, a summoner beginning his pilgrimage. And Jecht, perhaps seeking purpose, perhaps simply having nowhere else to go, becomes a guardian. He walks the path. Fights fiends. Protects the summoner. Forms bonds with Braskar and Orin. Becomes, in his own rough way, a better version of himself. Still flawed. Still struggling with his demons. But growing. Changing. Learning what it means to care about something beyond himself. And when they reach Zanarkand, when the truth is revealed, when the final summoning is explained, Jecht volunteers. Offers himself. Becomes the final Eon. Because Braskar has become his friend. Because this is something real he can do. Because, perhaps, it is a form of redemption. For all the ways he failed as a father. As a husband. As a person. The final Eon defeats sin. Brings the calm. And then, Yevon possesses it. Takes control. Transforms it into the next sin. Jecht becomes the core. The consciousness buried within the armored horror. Sometimes aware. Sometimes lost. Sometimes able to exert tiny fragments of control. Mostly, trapped. Transformed into the very thing he died to defeat. This is his tragedy. Sacrifice turned to nightmare. Heroism corrupted. The father who was never good enough, becomes the monster his son must face. Let this settle, feeling the terrible irony, the pain of good intentions twisted beyond recognition. Our third truth speaks of music and memory, but something of Jecht remains. Even within sin. Even corrupted and transformed and controlled by Yevon's instinctive summoning. There is a hymn. The hymn of the fate. A melody that has existed in Spira for centuries. Sacred. Beautiful. Mournful. Sung in temples. Associated with the fate themselves. With communion. With the spiritual. This hymn becomes associated with Jecht. And with sin. Not because Jecht created it. But because, somehow, it resonates with who he was. What he remembers. The fragments of consciousness that persist within the monster. And here is something remarkable. Something that reveals the tragedy even more deeply. Hearing the hymn calms sin. When it plays, when someone sings it, when the melody drifts across the water, sin pauses. Becomes less aggressive. Sometimes even retreats. Because it resonates with the remnants of Jecht's consciousness inside the monster. Because some part of him, buried deep, still exists. Still remembers. Still responds to beauty. To memory. To the echo of something sacred. The hymn doesn't control sin. Doesn't make him friendly. But it reaches him. Reminds him. Speaks to whatever remains of the man inside the beast. It is heartbreaking. Evidence that Jecht is still there. Still suffering. Still trapped. Unable to break free. Unable to stop what his body does. Just, aware enough to respond to a song. A father. A guardian. A man who tried to be better. Reduced to a monster that pauses, briefly, when it hears a hymn. Breathe through this, feeling the tragedy of consciousness trapped, of identity buried but not destroyed, of music as the last thread connecting monster to man. Our fourth understanding speaks of twisted philosophy born from pain. Seymour Guado. Beautiful. Powerful. Maester of Yevon. and deeply, profoundly, wrong. He is the son of Jiskel Guado, leader of the Guado people, and a human mother. Mixed heritage in a world that values purity. And this mixing brought him nothing but pain. The Guado rejected him. Half human, not pure, other. The humans rejected him. Half Guado. Strange. Different. He belonged nowhere. Was wanted by no one. Grew up knowing that his very existence was considered wrong by both sides of his heritage. This shapes him. Twists him. Creates a philosophy born from profound suffering. If existence is pain, if being alive means being rejected and hated and alone, then the kindest thing, the most loving thing, is to end existence. Death, in Seymour's view, is freedom. Liberation. The only escape from suffering. And Spira, trapped in its spiral of death, proves this. Life is suffering. The cycle continues. People hurt. People die. Over and over. So why not end it all? Why not use sin to destroy everything? To kill the world? To bring eternal peace through universal death? It is a twisted mercy. A dark love. The logic of someone who has been hurt so deeply that he can only conceive of escape, never of healing. Seymour doesn't want to save Spira. He wants to free it. Through annihilation. Through becoming sin himself. Through using that power to end all suffering, by ending all life. He believes this is compassionate. This is what Spira needs. That his pain, and his solution to pain, should be everyone's. It is the philosophy of someone broken. Who could not heal. Who turned suffering inward until it became something monstrous. Let this truth rest, understanding how pain can poison, how rejection can twist, how even compassion can become corruption, when filtered through enough trauma. Our fifth truth speaks of the heretic who became holy. But let us turn to someone different. Someone whose story is gentler, more hopeful. Braskar, Yuna's father, High Summoner, hero of the last calm. The man whose sacrifice brought 10 years of peace. But before he was any of those things, he was considered a heretic. Why? Because he married an Olbhead woman. Loved someone from the machine using outcasts. Chose connection over propriety. Family over doctrine. And then, when he began his pilgrimage, he chose Jekt and Oren as his guardians. Jekt, a drunk from nowhere who claimed to be from a Zanarkand that didn't exist. Oren, a young warrior monk with more questions than faith. Not traditional choices. Not safe choices. Not the kind of guardians that would bring honor or respect or the church's blessing. Braskar was radical. Quietly. Without making grand declarations. He simply lived differently. Loved who he loved. Chose who he trusted. Walked his path according to his own conscience rather than others' expectations. And he succeeded. Completed the pilgrimage. Defeated sin. Brought the calm. And in death, in sacrifice, he became what he never was in life. Acceptable. Honored. A high summoner. His heresy forgiven because his death was useful. Braskar's calm set the stage for the relatively peaceful world seen at the start of the game. For 10 years, children grew up without seeing sin. Couples married and planned futures. Cities were rebuilt. Life happened. All because of Braskar's sacrifice. And Jekt's. And the terrible bargain that neither fully understood when they made it. His legacy is complex. Hero and heretic. Radical and saint. The man who proved you could love an old pet, and still save the world. Let this settle, understanding how death sanctifies what life condemned, how sacrifice erases inconvenient truths, how even heroes are more complicated than their legends. Our sixth understanding speaks of the system's architect. Yunalesca. We have met her before. But let us understand her more fully. She is the daughter of Yevon, the first summoner to defeat sin. The original hero. The one who created the system of the final summoning. Who established the pattern that has continued for 1,000 years. And she remains. As an unsent. In Zanarkand. In the dome where the final summoning is performed. For a millennium. Watching. Explaining. Ensuring that every summoner who arrives, understands, and accepts, and sacrifices. Why does she stay? Why not move on to the far plane? Why persist as a ghost for centuries? Because she believes. Truly. Completely. That this is necessary. That the final summoning is the only way. That temporary peace is better than no peace. That sacrifice is noble. That the system works. She is not lying. Not deceiving. She genuinely believes that what she created, what she continues to maintain, is right. Is good. is the best possible option in an impossible situation. She cannot imagine another way. Will not imagine another way. Has spent 1,000 years convincing herself that this is justice. This is love. This is what must be done. And so she perpetuates the cycle. Generation after generation. Summoner after summoner. Explaining. Transforming. Watching them die. And feeling, what? Pride? Sorrow? Satisfaction? All of it? None of it? She has become the system incarnate. The guardian of false hope. The eternal priestess of temporary salvation. And when Una refuses, when someone finally says no, Unaleska cannot comprehend it. Cannot accept it. Must fight to maintain what she has protected for so long. Because if the final summoning is not necessary, if there is another way, then what has she done? What has she maintained? What have all those deaths meant? Better to fight. Better to preserve the system. Better to force acceptance. Than to face the possibility that 1,000 years of sacrifice was built on a lie. Breathe slowly, understanding how architects become prisoners of their own systems, how creators become enslaved to their creations, how even the first hero can become the eternal obstacle. Our seventh understanding speaks of hypocrisy at the highest level. Grand Maester Mika, the ultimate authority of Yevon, the voice of the church, the one who interprets doctrine, who makes final decisions, who guides all of Spira. He has been unsent for centuries, dead, but not moved on, continuing to rule from beyond death, leading the church that teaches the unsent are dangerous, that the dead must be sent, that lingering is wrong, except when you're in charge, except when you're powerful, except when your continued existence maintains the system. Then, apparently, the rules don't apply. Mika is proof. Living, or rather, unliving, proof of the church's deep hypocrisy about the undead. Do as we say, not as we do. The rules are for you. We are exceptions. He rules without question, without challenge. Because who can challenge a Grand Maester? Who can question the highest authority? Who can demand explanations from someone who has maintained power for longer than most people have been alive? The system protects him. His position protects him. His centuries of accumulated authority protect him. And he uses that protection to maintain everything. The cycle, the teachings, the lie. Because change would undermine his authority, would reveal the hypocrisy, would force questions that have no good answers. Better to continue, better to preserve, better to rule as an unsent, than to admit the system is broken. Let this truth rest, seeing how power perpetuates itself, how those at the top are exempt from rules they enforce on others, how hypocrisy becomes institutional when it serves those in control. And now, our eighth truth speaks of rebellion through rescue. But not everyone accepts the system. Not everyone follows the teachings. Some actively fight against it. Sid Riku's father, Yuna's uncle, leader of the Olbhead, and rescuer of summoners. The Olbhead have been conducting a campaign. Secret, dangerous, controversial even among their own people. They find summoners on pilgrimage. And they try to rescue them. To stop them. To prevent them from reaching Zanarkand. Not through violence. Not by killing them. But by persuasion. By kidnapping if necessary. By any means that might save their lives. Because Sid believes, knows, that the final summoning is a useless, cruel cycle that must be broken. It doesn't truly defeat sin. It just postpones. Transforms the sacrifice into the next incarnation. Perpetuates suffering while pretending to end it. So Sid fights. Uses Olbhead technology. Builds machines that can track summoners. Intercept them. Offer them another choice. Most summoners refuse. Most continue their pilgrimage. They believe too deeply. Are too committed. Cannot turn back after coming so far. But some are saved. Rescued from their own sacrifice. Given the chance to live. To choose differently. The church calls this heresy. Kidnapping. Interference with sacred duty. The faithful hate the Olbhead even more for it. But Sid doesn't care about the church's opinion. Doesn't care about doctrine or tradition or the spiral of death. He cares about saving lives. About refusing to accept that children must die to maintain a broken system. He is a revolutionary. Practical. Technological. Loving in the most active sense. Refusing to accept what everyone else considers inevitable. And when his niece begins her pilgrimage, when Una follows her father's path, Sid must watch. Must hope. Must trust that Riku will succeed where his rescue operations have usually failed. Must trust that maybe, this time, someone he loves will survive. Let this truth settle, understanding how love drives rebellion, how technology can be compassion, how saving one life is worth being called a heretic. Let us pause, among these lives. We have met them now. The extended cast. Those who orbit around Yuna's pilgrimage. Some supporting. Some opposing. Some trapped by the system. Some fighting against it. Riku the preventer. Jack the transformed. Seymour the poisoned. Braskar the heretic hero. Yunalesca the eternal gatekeeper. Mika the hypocritical ruler. Sid the active rescuer. Each one shapes the story. Each one represents something about Spira. About choices. About systems. About how people respond to impossible circumstances. And so, we conclude this 10th journey, through the lives that surround our core group. Through family and monsters. Through architects and rebels. Through those who maintain systems and those who fight to break them. Let these stories rest, gently. You need not carry them heavily. Simply, acknowledge them, understand them, and then, release them into rest. More awaits, in future segments. More truths to explore. More connections to make. But for now, breathe deeply, slowly, and rest, knowing that every system has both guardians and rebels, that every cycle has both architects and escapees, that every truth has those who maintain it, and those who challenge it. Rest, and let these lives fade gently into sleep. Welcome back to our journey through Spira. Tonight we expand our view. Step back from individual lives, and see the places where those lives unfold. The towns and cities, the roads and ruins, and the different peoples who call this world home. Breathe slowly, and let us explore. Our first truth speaks of a village that shelters. Besaid Island. Remote. Small. A village surrounded by jungle and ocean. Far from the centers of power. Far from Bavel's politics and Yevon's grand temples. This is a place that has known suffering. Recently, Sin attacked. Devastated the village. Destroyed homes and lives. Left survivors to rebuild from rubble and grief. But Besaid rebuilt. As Spira always rebuilds. With faith. With community. With the quiet determination of people who have survived before and will survive again. This village is devout. Deeply so. Yevon's teachings guide everything. Daily prayers. Strict adherence to doctrine. Faith as a framework for all of life. It is not questioned here. Not challenged. Simply, lived. And this village became Yuna's home. After her father's death. After Braskar became Sin. After she was left orphaned. Besaid sheltered her. Raised her. Kept her safe from Bavel's politics. From those who might seek to use or manipulate the daughter of a high summoner. Here, she could be just Yuna. A child. A student. A person. Protected by distance. By obscurity. By the love of a small community that claimed her as their own. Waka and Lulu raised her here. Taught her. Kept her grounded. And when she decided to become a summoner, Besaid supported her. Celebrated her. Sent her forth with pride and sorrow both. It is a place of simple faith. Of genuine community. Of the kind of devotion that is real, even if based on teachings that are not entirely true. Let this image settle, a small village. Remote. Faithful. The kind of place where heroes begin their journeys. Our second understanding speaks of devastation and public grief. Kilika. A small port town. Not as isolated as Besaid. Connected to trade routes. To the mainland. To the flow of Spira's life. But Sin devastates Kilika early in the story. Attacks while Tidus and the party are there. Or just arriving. Fire and destruction. Buildings collapsing. People dying. The sudden, terrible reality of Sin's power made immediate and personal. This is where Yuna performs her first public sending. Not in the safety of Besaid. Not in private. But here. In the aftermath of catastrophe. With hundreds watching. With fireflies rising like golden snow from the dead. She dances. Young. Graceful. Carrying a burden too heavy for anyone. Guiding the dead to the far plane. Preventing them from becoming fiends. Offering what comfort can be offered, when comfort is impossible. And the people watch. See her. Recognize her. The daughter of Braskar. A summoner. Walking her father's path. Offering hope through her own future sacrifice. This moment, this sending, makes Yuna known across Spira. Not just another summoner. Not just another name. But a real person. Someone they have seen. Someone who helped their dead. Someone who matters. Kilika rebuilds. As it always does. As Spira always does. But the memory of that sending, of that young woman dancing among the fireflies, that endures. Let this truth rest, understanding how public moments shape perception, how witnessing grief transforms it into something shared, how one act of compassion can ripple outward. Our third truth speaks of joy maintained against all odds. Lucca, the largest port city in Spira. Bustling. Crowded. Full of trade and life and noise and energy. And at its heart, the Blitzball Stadium. Massive. Magnificent. A sphere of water where teams compete. Where crowds gather. Where for a few hours, people can forget about sin. Can cheer. Can celebrate. Can feel something other than fear. This is what Lucca represents. Spira's attempt to hold on to joy and normalcy under sin's constant threat. To say, we will not just survive. We will live. We will have sports and celebrations and moments of pure happiness. Even if sin could attack at any moment. Even if this gathering of thousands makes it a target. Even if maintaining this normalcy requires a certain willful blindness to danger. The Blitzball tournament happens anyway. People come anyway. They cheer and bet and argue about plays and lose themselves in the game. Because humans need this. Need joy. Need distraction. Need something beyond just grimly enduring. Need to remember what life is for. Lucca is defiance. Not through weapons or armies. But through continuing to live. Through refusing to let fear consume everything. Through maintaining traditions and celebrations, even when maintaining them is dangerous. It is beautiful. And fragile. And necessary. Let this settle, understanding how joy is resistance, how normalcy is courage, how simply living fully is its own form of rebellion. Our fourth understanding speaks of roads and memory. The Miehen High Road. A long stretch of road. Well-traveled. Connecting different parts of Spira. Named after Lord Miehen. Founder of the Crusaders. A warrior who believed that people could fight sin. Could resist. Could do more than just wait for summoners to save them. The road is lined with ruins. Old structures. From before sin's resurgence. From when civilization reached higher. Built more. Spread further. Evidence of what was lost. What had to be abandoned. What sin took away. Walking this road is walking through memory. Through the ghosts of greater times. Through the physical evidence that Spira was once more than it is now. The Crusaders, those who follow Miehen's philosophy, patrol this road. Protect travelers. Fight fiends. Attempt to maintain some level of safety. Some level of order. They are not summoners. Not magical. Just people. With weapons. With determination. With the belief that ordinary humans can make a difference. Can contribute. Can protect what they love. The church tolerates them. Barely. Because they are useful. Because they fill a need. But Yevon does not fully approve. Because the Crusaders represent a challenge to the doctrine. If ordinary people can fight sin, even in small ways, then perhaps summoners are not the only answer. Perhaps the system is not the only way. The high road is named for this man. This idea. This belief that people matter. That they can act. That they are not just passive victims waiting to be saved. It is a monument to human agency. To the desire to do something. Anything. Even when the odds are impossible. Let this truth rest, understanding how places carry meaning, how names preserve memory, how roads can be statements. Our fifth truth speaks of failed ambition. Mushroom Rock Road. A place of unusual geology. Where massive stone formations rise like mushrooms from the earth. Beautiful in a strange way. Otherworldly. But this place becomes known for something else. Something tragic. Operation Miehen. Where Crusaders and Olbhead attempt to defeat sin. Not with summoners. Not with the final summoning. But with forbidden machina. With weapons. With military force. It is a grand plan. Ambitious. Desperate. An attempt to prove that humanity can fight back. That the cycle can be broken through force. Through technology. Through human ingenuity and courage. They fail. Catastrophically. Sin comes. Destroys the machina. Kills most of the Crusaders. Devastates the operation. Proves, it seems, that Yevon was right. That machina attracts sin. That attempting to fight without summoners is futile. The failure is used by the church. As proof. As validation. as evidence that the teachings are correct, that deviation leads to death, that the old ways are the only ways. But perhaps the lesson is different. Perhaps it's not that fighting is wrong, but that fighting with inadequate tools is doomed. That half measures against an ultimate weapon will always fail. That to truly defeat sin requires understanding its nature, not just throwing weapons at it. Mushroom Rock Road becomes a memorial to ambition, to failure, to the deaths of those who tried something different, and to the way systems use failure to reinforce their own necessity. Let this settle, understanding how failure can be weaponized, how one disaster can justify centuries of stagnation, how courage that fails can still be courage. Our sixth understanding speaks of the persecuted preservers. Now let us turn from places to peoples, to the different races and cultures that inhabit Spira, each with their own ways, their own beliefs, their own place in this complex world. The Ulbhead, nomadic, machine-using, marked by spiral green eyes that identify them instantly, identifiably different, visibly other. They are persecuted by Yevon, called heretics, blamed when sin attacks, treated with suspicion at best, hatred at worst, driven from cities, forbidden from temples, made to live on the margins. Why? Because they use machina, because they preserve pre-sin technology, because they refuse to abandon the tools that could make life easier, safer, better. But here is the irony, the tragedy. The Ulbhead are vital to preserving knowledge that would otherwise be lost. They maintain libraries, salvage technology from ruins, keep alive the understanding of how things were built, how they worked, what was possible. If Spira is to ever move beyond its current state, if the cycle is ever to be broken, if progress is ever to resume, the Ulbhead's preserved knowledge will be essential. They are persecuted for the very thing that makes them invaluable, hated for being the keepers of hope, driven away while desperately needed. They survive through adaptability, through their own communities, through their language, which outsiders cannot understand, which provides some privacy, some protection, and they continue their work, salvaging, building, rescuing summoners when they can, fighting in their own way, against a system that wants them to disappear. Let this truth rest, understanding how minorities are often blamed for preserving what majorities fear, how the persecuted often carry the seeds of future salvation, how difference is punished, even when difference is necessary. Our seventh truth speaks of mountain guardians. The Ronso, tall, powerful, feline features, blue skin and fierce horns. A warrior race living on Mount Gagazet, the sacred mountain, the final barrier before Zanarkand. The Ronso see themselves as guardians, protectors of the mountain, keepers of the path. They do not prevent summoners from passing, but they test them, judge them, ensure that only those truly worthy, truly committed, reach the summit. This is their culture, their purpose, their pride, strength, honor, the ability to fight, the willingness to die protecting what matters. A Ronso with a broken horn, like Kamari, is shamed, because the horn represents their strength, their ability to defend. To lose it, to have it broken in combat, suggests defeat, weakness, failure of duty. It is a harsh culture, demanding, built around ideals of martial prowess and unflinching courage, but also protective, loyal, deeply connected to place and purpose. They guard Mount Gagazet because it is sacred, because summoners must pass this way, because someone must stand between the world and the final trials, must ensure that only the strongest, the most determined, reach Zanarkand. The Ronso are few, isolated, living in their mountain home. But they matter. Their guardianship matters. They are part of the system, in their own way, maintaining the pilgrimage path, ensuring its continuation. Let this settle, understanding how cultures build around purpose, how honor systems can be both beautiful and harsh, how guardianship can be both service and prison. Our eighth understanding speaks of custodians of death. The Guado, dwelling in Guado Salam, tall, graceful, somewhat plant-like in appearance, with long limbs and elegant movements, different from humans. Visibly, undeniably, they see themselves as custodians of the far plane, the realm of the dead. Guado Salam sits at its entrance, and the Guado, with their natural affinity for fireflies, with their spiritual sensitivity, serve as guides. As intermediaries between living and dead, they are fast, supernaturally so. moving within human speed. And they understand death in ways others do not. Can sense the unsent. Can navigate the spiritual realm with ease. This makes them valuable, necessary, but also slightly unsettling to others. They are too comfortable with death, too familiar with the boundary between life and ending. It makes them seem cold, distant, other. Under Seymour's leadership, twisted as he is, some of this role becomes corrupted. The custodians of death, led by someone who loves death too much, who sees it as solution rather than passage, who wants to be sin himself. But most Guado are not like Seymour. Most simply serve, maintain the far plane, help the living visit their dead, provide comfort through connection to memory. They are spiritual specialists, death workers, grief counselors. In a world where death is constant, this role is vital, essential, even if it sets them apart, even if it makes them seem strange to those less comfortable with mortality. Let this truth rest, understanding how cultures form around needs, how specialization creates both value and isolation, how comfort with death can be both gift and burden. Our ninth understanding speaks of the majority that accepts. And then, there are humans. The majority. Living in Besaid and Kilika and Luka and Bevel. In villages and towns across Spira. Most of the population. Most of what we think of as normal. They form the backbone of society. The farmers and fishers. The merchants and craftspeople. The priests and warriors. The ordinary people living ordinary lives under extraordinary circumstances. And most accept Yevon's teachings without question. Without knowing their fabricated history. Without understanding the lies woven into doctrine. Without seeing the hypocrisy at the top. They pray daily. Follow the rules. Avoid machina. Support summoners. Believe that if they are faithful enough, if they atone sufficiently, sin might be kept at bay just a little longer. This is not stupidity. Not weakness. This is what humans do. We accept the explanations we're given. Especially when those explanations come from authority. From tradition. From everyone around us accepting the same things. To question requires unusual courage. Unusual circumstances. Unusual access to contrary information. Most people, in any world, simply live within the systems they are born into. The humans of Spira are doing their best. Living. Loving. Raising children. Finding meaning. Under the shadow of sin. Under the weight of doctrine. Within the constraints of a system they did not choose and cannot imagine changing. They are not villains. Not fools. Just people. Doing what people do. Making the best of impossible circumstances. Let this settle, understanding how systems persist not through evil, but through simple acceptance, how most people are not heroes or villains, just ordinary humans trying to survive. And now, our 10th truth speaks of bridges and barriers. In this world of different peoples, intercultural relationships are rare and stigmatized. Braskar married an Olbhed woman. This made him a heretic. Marked him as suspect. Made his eventual heroism surprising to those who had judged him for loving differently. Jiskal Guado had a relationship with a human woman. Produced Seymour. A child who belonged nowhere. Who was rejected by both sides of his heritage. Whose very existence was considered wrong. These relationships, rare as they are, shape the backstories of major characters. Una exists because her father crossed cultural lines. Seymour is twisted partly because his parents' relationship was condemned. The barriers between peoples are strong. Not just practical. Not just geographic. But ideological. Spiritual. Built into doctrine and reinforced by prejudice. Olbhed and Yevon followers. Guado and humans. Ronso and outsiders. Each maintaining distance. Each viewing the others with suspicion. Each losing the richness that diversity could bring. Breaking these barriers requires courage. Requires seeing past surface differences. Requires choosing love over tradition. Connection over purity. And when these barriers are broken, the children of such unions carry both blessing and curse. Connected to multiple worlds. Belonging fully to none. But perhaps able to see truths that those trapped within single cultures cannot. Perhaps it is the bridges between cultures that will ultimately save Spira. Let this truth rest, understanding how prejudice divides, how mixed heritage can be both burden and gift, how those who belong to multiple worlds often become the ones who change everything. Let us pause, among these places and peoples. We have traveled across Spira tonight. From Besaid to Kilika to Luka. down the Miehen High Road to Mushroom Rock Road. Met the Olb Head in Ronso and Guado. Understood the human majority. Seen how intercultural relationships are both rare and significant. This is the world where the story unfolds. Complex, diverse, beautiful and broken. Full of different peoples trying to coexist. Different places holding different memories. And so, we conclude this 11th journey, through locations and cultures. Through villages and cities. Through roads and battles. Through the different peoples who call Spira home. Let these images rest, gently. You need not carry them as burdens. Simply, understand them, see them, and then, let them be. More awaits, in future segments. More connections to make. More truths to explore. But for now, breathe deeply, slowly, and rest, knowing that every world contains multitudes, that every culture has its own truth, that every place carries its own history, and that understanding these differences, these complexities, these diverse perspectives, is essential to understanding the whole. Rest, and let these places and peoples fade gently into sleep. Welcome back to our deepening exploration of Spira. Tonight we venture off the main path, into places that not every pilgrim sees, into secrets that require curiosity to uncover, into the hidden corners where optional truths wait patiently for those willing to seek them. Breathe slowly, and let us explore what lies beneath, what waits beyond, what whispers from the shadows. Our first truth speaks of a cavern and its bitter guardian. Beneath the calm lands, those vast plains created by ancient war, there lies a cavern. Hidden. Difficult to reach. The cavern of the stolen fate. The name itself tells a story. Stolen. Not given. Not offered willingly. Taken. And within this cavern, rests something tragic. An unsent summoner. Someone who, long ago, walked the pilgrimage. But did not complete it. Did not reach Samarkand. Did not perform the final summoning. Instead, this summoner became a fate. But not in the traditional way. Not sealed in a temple. Not honored and maintained by priests. This one was stolen. Taken. Transformed outside the sanctioned system. And the fate they became, Powers Yojimbo. A mercenary eon. One who must be paid. Who serves for gil rather than loyalty. Who embodies, perhaps, the bitterness of the transformation. The resentment of becoming a tool. A weapon. Without the dignity of temple and ritual. The cavern is filled with unsent. Many of them. Summoners who failed their pilgrimages. Who died before Zanarkand. Who linger, unable or unwilling to move on. And fiends. Because where the unsent gather, especially in places touched by old anger and bitter failure, fiends manifest. It is a sad place. A place of abandoned dreams. Of interrupted journeys. Of sacrifices that were never completed, and thus never honored. To venture here is to see the cost of the system in a different way. Not the grand sacrifice of the final summoning. But the smaller deaths. The failures. The ones who are forgotten because they did not reach the end. Let this image settle, a cavern beneath the plains, filled with ghosts of incomplete pilgrimages, housing a fate that embodies resentment. Our second understanding reveals a temple forgotten. In the gorge of the calm lands, hidden away from the main path, there sits another temple. The Ramim Temple. Not on any official pilgrimage route. Not maintained by Yevon's priests. Not part of the sanctioned system. This is a place that exists outside. A temple that remembers older times. Different practices. Perhaps from before Yevon's church consolidated power. Before the pilgrimage path was formalized. When summoners might have traveled different routes. Sought different fate. Here, those who venture off the beaten path can obtain the Mega Sisters. 3 eons. 3 sisters. Together. A powerful alliance. But not one granted through the official channels. Not one tied to Yevon's authority. The temple has become something else now. A place where chocobo races are held. Where people compete in the ruins. Taking something sacred, and making it recreational. Perhaps this is sacrilege. Or perhaps, it is simply adaptation. Taking what was abandoned by the official church, and giving it new purpose. New life. The Ramim Temple represents possibility. The idea that the sanctioned path is not the only path. That other ways exist. Other fate. Other connections that do not require Yevon's blessing. It is a whisper of what Spira might have been. Or could become. If the church's monopoly on summoning were broken. If the pilgrimage were not the only way. If different traditions were allowed to flourish. Let this truth rest, understanding how forgotten places hold alternative histories, how the margins preserve what the center discards, how sacred spaces can transform when authority withdraws. Our third truth speaks of rage that outlasts death. The Omega Ruins. A dangerous place. Optional. Filled with powerful fiends. A dungeon that challenges even the strongest. But it is not just a random collection of monsters. This place formed around something. Someone. A spirit so powerful, so consumed by rage, that it shaped the very structure around it. Omega. A former monk of Yevon. Executed as a traitor. Perhaps he questioned the teachings. Perhaps he discovered too much truth. Perhaps he simply opposed the wrong people. The records are unclear. History is written by those who remain in power. But his execution did not end him. Did not send him to the far plane. The rage was too strong. The sense of betrayal too deep. The need for vengeance too consuming. His unsent spirit lingered. Grew. Transformed into a powerful fiend. And around that fiend, around that core of rage, the Omega Ruins formed. A physical manifestation of anger. Of injustice unresolved. Of death that cannot rest. This is what happens when the church's enemies are not properly sent. When execution leaves behind spirits too angry to move on. The very act of suppression creates the conditions for ongoing haunting. Omega is proof of Yevon's failures. Evidence that their methods create the problems they claim to solve. That violence against dissenters does not end dissent. Just transforms it into something darker. Something that persists. To venture into the Omega Ruins is to confront the consequences of institutional betrayal. To face what happens when truth-tellers are silenced. When justice is perverted. When the church destroys its own. Let this settle, understanding how rage can shape reality, how injustice creates monsters, how the killed sometimes refuse to stay dead. Our fourth understanding speaks of arrival and unlocking. Barge Temple. Mostly submerged. Flooded. Reclaimed by the ocean. A temple that has fallen to water and time and sin's attacks. This is where Titus first arrives in Spira. Pulled from dreams and Archand. Deposited here. In this ruined place. Surrounded by water. Confused. Lost. Beginning a journey he doesn't understand. It is fitting, perhaps, that his arrival point is a submerged temple. A place that exists between states. Between functional and destroyed. Between sacred and abandoned. Between what was and what might be. Later, if the party returns, if they venture back to this beginning point, they can unlock something. Anima. The most powerful standard eon. Dark. Painful. Born from suffering. But unlocking anima requires work. Requires visiting all the other temples. Activating destruction glyphs hidden within. Pieces of a puzzle scattered across Spira. A quest that requires persistence. Dedication. Willingness to go back to places already visited and look more carefully. This is meaningful. To obtain anima, you must revisit the pilgrimage path. Must see the temples with new eyes. Must find what was hidden. Must connect pieces that seemed unrelated. It is a metaphor, perhaps, for the journey itself. For how understanding requires returning to what you thought you knew. Looking deeper. Finding connections you missed the first time. Barge Temple is both beginning and culmination. Where Titus arrives. Where anima is obtained. Alpha and Omega of a different sort. Let this truth rest, understanding how places of arrival can become places of revelation, how endings are hidden in beginnings, how returning shows us what we missed. Our fifth truth speaks of execution grounds hidden. Beneath Bevel. Under the holy city. Under the grand temple and the political center of Yevon's power. There lies the Via Purifico. The name sounds almost beautiful. Latinesque. Formal. Official. But its purpose is dark. This is execution ground and underground prison combined. Where Yevon sends its enemies. Where those who oppose the church disappear. It is literally burying enemies under the holy city. A perfect metaphor. The foundation of Bevel's grandeur is built on suppressed dissent. On silenced voices. On bodies that never received proper burial. The Via Purifico is where Yuna and her party are sent after their capture. After the trial. After Yevon decides they are too dangerous to exist openly. Down into the darkness. Expected to die there. To be forgotten. To become one more set of unsent spirits haunting the underbelly of religious authority. But they survive. Fight their way out. Refuse to be buried. Refuse to be forgotten. Refuse to let Yevon erase them quietly. The Via Purifico represents everything wrong with Yevon's system. The violence hidden beneath piety. The cruelty concealed under ceremony. The way authority maintains itself through suppression. Through literally burying what it cannot control. To see Bevel fully, you must see both its grand temples and its execution chambers. Both its public face and its hidden foundation. Both what it proclaims and what it practices. The holy city stands on buried bodies. This is not metaphor. This is architecture. This is intentional design. This is how the system maintains itself. Let this truth rest, understanding how power often rests on hidden violence, how the beautiful is built on the buried, how looking beneath reveals foundations of suffering. Our sixth understanding speaks of love acknowledged. But not all hidden things are dark. Not all optional moments reveal systemic cruelty. Some are simply beautiful. Simply human. Simply about two people recognizing what they feel. In Macalania Woods. If you venture to certain places. If you trigger certain scenes. You can witness more about Titus and Eunice's feelings. How they see each other. How something is growing between them. Something that transcends duty. Transcends the pilgrimage. Transcends the knowledge that Una is walking toward death. The famous lakeside moment. Where they kiss in the water. Where for a brief instant, the weight of the world lifts. Where they are not summoner and guardian. Not dream and sacrifice. Just two young people. Finding connection. Finding love. In a world that seems designed to prevent such things. This moment becomes a symbol. Of the end of the old cycle. Of choosing personal joy over prescribed duty. Of saying, even if the world demands sacrifice, even if tradition requires death, we will have this. We will choose this. We will love despite everything. It is revolutionary in its own way. Not through violence. Not through grand declarations. But through simple human connection. Through refusing to let the system prevent this one moment of genuine happiness. These optional scenes in Macalania Woods deepen what is already present. Make explicit what the main story only hints at. Show that beneath the grand narrative of summoners and sin and breaking cycles, there is a love story. A human story. About choosing connection even when everything says you shouldn't. Let this settle, feeling the gentle beauty of it, the defiance in choosing love, the power of personal joy against systemic tragedy. Our seventh truth speaks of memory shaped by longing. Visiting the far plain in Guado Salam. This is not required. Not part of the pilgrimage. But many do it anyway. Because the far plain offers something precious. The chance to see the dead. To speak to them. To remember. But here is something subtle. Something the game hints at but does not state directly. The far plane shows how fireflies shape images of the dead based on the viewer's memories. Not literal souls appearing. But manifestations. Constructs. Built from the living person's recollections and longing. This is why different people sometimes see the same dead person differently. Why the images respond to expectations. Why they seem slightly off. Not quite right. Close but not perfect. The far plane is beautiful. Comforting. It gives people what they need. A chance to say goodbye. To feel connection across the boundary of death. But it is not quite what it appears to be. Not quite the souls themselves appearing. More like echoes. Reflections. Memories given temporary form. This raises questions. About what the far plane really is. About whether the dead truly rest there. About the nature of fireflies and consciousness and what happens after death. Questions the game never fully answers. Perhaps cannot answer. But the hint is there. For those who look closely. For those who wonder why the images seem malleable. Why they reflect the viewer's needs. Why they are comforting in exactly the ways each person requires. The far plane gives people what they need to grieve. To continue. To find peace. And perhaps, that is enough. Perhaps the technical truth of how it works matters less than the comfort it provides. Let this truth rest, understanding how memory and spirit intertwine, how comfort can be real even if manifestation is not literal, how the dead live on in how we remember them. Our eighth understanding speaks of gradual transformation. An optional scene at Rin's travel agencies. And along the Mie High Road. Small moments. Easy to miss. But significant for one character in particular. Waka. And his relationship with the Ulb head. His gradual softening toward Machina users. At first, he is hostile. Prejudiced. Carrying Chapu's death as fuel for hatred. Blaming an entire people for his brother's loss. Seeing them as heretics. As dangerous. as wrong. But optional interactions, conversations with Rin, meeting Olped along the road, learning that Yuna herself is part Olped. Slowly, painfully, his views shift. Not dramatically. Not in one moment of revelation. But gradually. Through accumulated experiences. Through meeting individuals rather than hating abstractions. Through being forced to confront his prejudice with actual people who contradict his assumptions. These optional scenes track this transformation. Show the process. Make it feel earned rather than sudden. Walker doesn't just wake up one day thinking differently. He struggles. Resists. Argues. Slowly, grudgingly, changes. It is one of the more realistic character developments. Because this is how prejudice often breaks. Not through grand moments. But through small encounters. Through relationship. Through the slow erosion of hate by the presence of contradicting evidence. The optional nature of these scenes makes them feel more real. They are not forced. Not scripted into the main narrative in obvious ways. They are there for those who pay attention. Who seek out side conversations. Who notice the small changes in dialogue and attitude. Let this truth rest, understanding how change happens gradually, how prejudice breaks through relationship, how transformation is often quiet and accumulating rather than dramatic. Our ninth truth speaks of recordings left behind. Scattered across Spira. In various locations. Hidden in places that require exploration to reach. There are spheres. Ject spheres. Recordings. Video and audio captured on sphere technology. Messages from the past. These spheres unlock backstory. Show recordings of Braska, Orin, and Jekt's pilgrimage. From 10 years ago. Before Jekt became Sin. When he was still a guardian. Still a person. Still struggling with who he was and who he wanted to be. The recordings show their banter. Their relationship. How they interacted. How Jekt was rough and loud and often inappropriate. But also, how he cared. How he changed over time. How the pilgrimage transformed him. You see Braska's gentleness. Orin's youth and earnestness. Jekt's gradual softening. The way these three men, so different, became family. Became brothers in purpose. Became something more than they were individually. These spheres are optional. Completely missable. But they add tremendous depth. Turn Jekt from abstract monster into real person. Show that the previous pilgrimage was not just backstory. But lived experience. Real relationships. Real growth and change and love. Finding all the spheres creates a complete picture. Of how Jekt arrived in Spira. How he struggled. How he tried to get home. How he eventually accepted that he couldn't. How he chose to make his life in this world meaningful. How he became, not a good father, because he wasn't there to be a father, but a good guardian. A good friend. A good person in the ways he could manage. It redeems him. Not completely. Not in ways that erase the pain he caused Titus. But enough. Enough to make him human. Enough to make his transformation into Sin even more tragic. Let this truth rest, understanding how recorded memories preserve truth, how seeing the past changes understanding of the present, how optional exploration rewards with deeper knowledge. And now, our 10th truth, speaks of a world responding. Returning to earlier locations after major plot events. Besaid. Kilika. Luka. The places you visited at the journey's beginning. When you were following the script. Before you challenged the system. Before Yuna's rebellion. The world has changed. NPCs say different things. React to you differently. Reflect Spira's shifting view of Yevon and summoners after everything that has happened. In Besaid, where faith was unquestioned, people are confused. Uncertain. What does it mean that Yuna refused the final summoning? Is she a heretic? A visionary? Are the teachings true? Should they still pray? In Kilika, where they saw her perform the sending, where they loved her as a summoner, they struggled to reconcile that love with her actions. Some support her. Some feel betrayed. Some simply don't know what to think. Everywhere, the dialogue shifts. Reflects the earthquake in belief. The cracking of certainty. The slow realization that everything they thought they knew might not be true. This optional returning, this willingness to go back and see how things have changed, reveals something important. That the main character's journey affects the whole world. That Yuna's choice sends ripples everywhere. That revolution, even successful revolution, leaves people confused and frightened and uncertain. Change is hard. Even necessary change. Even good change. People lose their frameworks. Their certainty. Their sense of how the world works. and they must rebuild. Must figure out what they believe now. What guides them? What gives meaning? The changed NPC dialogue shows this process. The messy, uncomfortable, uncertain process of a world waking up from a 1,000-year dream and trying to figure out what comes next. Let this truth settle, understanding how change affects everyone, how revolution is disorienting even for those it frees, how the work of rebuilding is harder than the work of breaking. Let us pause among these hidden truths. We have ventured off the main path tonight, into caverns and forgotten temples, into execution chambers and places of love, into the far plane and the recorded past, into the slow changes that careful observation reveals. These optional discoveries deepen understanding, show that there is more to Spira than the main pilgrimage route reveals, that paying attention rewards, that exploring matters, that the full truth requires seeking. And so, we conclude this 12th journey, through hidden places and optional truths, through caverns of bitterness and temples of possibility, through execution grounds and moments of love, through memories shaped by longing and prejudice broken gradually. Let these discoveries rest, softly. You need not carry them as burdens. Simply, acknowledge them, treasure them, and then, let them be. More awaits, in future segments. More threads to follow. More depths to explore. But for now, breathe deeply, slowly, and rest, knowing that the most important truths are often hidden, waiting for those curious enough, patient enough, willing enough to seek them out. Rest, and let these secrets fade gently into sleep.